Chapter 109. Everyone in the pavilion was laughing. Both Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong breathed out a long sigh of relief and laughed. Lu Qingfeng had a relaxed and hopeful smile on his face, while Princess Zhanglu had a silly and blurry smile, and no one knew what she was laughing at. Wu Qi could clearly see a gleam of wild joy flashing in the eyes of Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong. Princess Zhanglu nodded her head and said, "Of course. Sister Yaonu has taken in a disciple, and is mining a few energy stone veins in her disciple's territory. Who dares to say anything against that? All the other immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty are secretly mining energy stone veins in their own territories, and none of them dares to say anything against that. It's just that Sister Yaonu is too dutiful, and that's why she didn't do that. In fact, Sister Yaonu should have done that long ago." She breathed out a satisfied sigh, frowned and said, "But, these energy stone veins are under the control of Great Yan Dynasty. If I send someone to mine them, I'm afraid the imperial court will have a hard time explaining it to them." Princess Zhongli's words were naive and innocent, and it made Wu Qi and the others smile bitterly. The difference between an innate spirit item and an acquired treasure was that an innate spirit item contained a thread of innate energy. The biggest effect of the so-called innate energy was that once a cultivator spent a long time with it, especially after he had transformed it into a magical treasure and refined it into his own body, it could slowly transform the cultivator's physique, transforming his mortal body into an innate body. The so-called divine flame of order was actually a wisp of aura of heaven and earth's law hidden in this inconspicuous purple and green flame, which formed a natural law of the heaven and earth. Just like the deterrent force that the government officials in the mortal world could give to local ruffians, the divine flame of order had a very strong restraining force on all evil spirits under the heaven and earth. Enveloped by the divine flame of order, all Yin devils and heavenly devils, both tangible and intangible, would not dare to come close to it. If a cultivator could cultivate in it, no external devils would dare to invade his or her body. Together with the magical effect of the soul awakening wood, the cultivator would be able to keep both internal and external devils at bay, and the cultivator would be able to cultivate in peace. She stroked the turtle shell with mixed emotions, then said with a deep voice, "Not only does this turtle shell contain all the techniques of the art of heaven patching formation, it is also a rare defensive magical treasure. Defensive-type magic treasures are 100 times rarer than offensive magic treasures. Since you cultivate the Tao of formations, I don't have a flying sword to bestow upon you. If you refine it, you will have the capital to defend yourself." For example, if Nia Yaonu kept the stone of separation with her for a long period of time, her body would gradually transform into an innate body of earth element. By then, she would not need to cultivate any earth elemental magic or cultivation technique, and she would be able to freely breathe in the earth elemental energy. Like an innate divine ability, she would be able to unleash all kinds of earth elemental magic and divine abilities. However, if a Hotian cultivator wanted to cast all kinds of earth attribute magic arts, he would have to chant incantations, make hand seals, and painstakingly temper his body and magic power. This would be extremely difficult. Among all the people here, only Wu Qi had the strangest smile on his face. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a sneaky smile of a rat that was about to steal oil. While laughing happily, he kept sneaking sneaky glances at the dustless lamp, revealing his 2 rows of teeth, which looked very eye-catching under the dim greenish light. In short, now that Lu Qingfeng had joined Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, it was a good thing for everyone. There was nothing more suitable than this. "Oh!" Wu Qi exclaimed with great surprise, then he kept looking at the dustless lamp with an envious and surprised expression. 2 beams of blue gleam flashed from the depth of his eyes, as he had memorized the entire image of the dustless lamp in his mind. The 6 pillars of this dustless lamp were carved from an innate stone of separation, which contained innate earth energy essence, making it heavy and stable. Therefore, no dust could get close to it. Putting aside the innate stone of separation and innate soul awakening wood, Wu Qi only needed to extract a thread of innate energy from them, and he would be able to start cultivating the source of earth chapter and source of wood chapter. As for this thread of divine flame of order, not only did Wu Qi want to obtain a thread of innate fire energy from it, he also had the intention to subdue it for his own use. The power of this flame was immense, and it had countless magical effects. In the future, no matter it was crafting items, formations, concocting pills, or some other things, this innate divine flame would be very useful. With utmost respect, Lu Qingfeng kowtowed a few times to Nie Yaonu, then took over the turtle shell with both hands. With a serious tone, he said, "I'm ashamed to accept it. The knowledge of formations is my biggest hobby. I'll definitely carry the arts of heaven patching formation to a greater height, bringing glory to heaven-breaking sword sect." After a brief pause, Lu Qingfeng smiled and said, "In addition, there are a few energy stone veins in my territory. They have a huge amount of reserves, and their quality is excellent. Since I'm a disciple of heaven-breaking sword sect, naturally, these energy stone veins will be incorporated into the sect's property. I hope Grand Elder can quickly send someone to take over the management of the mine, and take charge of the mining." Recalling the description of innate spirit items found in Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi felt a burning flame burning in his heart. Above the seat of the lamp was a thumb-thick, 1 foot and 2 inches tall flame of purple and green. It was the divine flame of order, a flame that had gathered the essence of the sun and moon, as well as the essence of all the stars in the universe, and was smelted by the tremendous power of the heaven and earth. Among the 3 innate spirit items found in the dustless lamp, this divine flame of order had the highest quality, and its power was also the greatest. Among all the flames in the universe, it could be ranked in the top 5. But now, as Lu Qingfeng had given them a few energy stone veins, the mother and son could finally go all out and work hard. Soon, those disciples who were close to them would have a great amount of energy stones to help them in their cultivation, and the progress of their cultivation would take a huge leap. Within 3 days, I must get my hands on the dustless lamp. Wu Qi made up his mind. This was the difference between an innate spirit item and an acquired precious treasure. No matter how powerful an acquired precious treasure was, it did not have the miraculous effect of changing one's innate talent like an innate spirit item. On the other hand, the innate talent was the foundation of a cultivator. For a cultivator who possessed an innate body, it would take him at least 1,000 years to become a gold immortal. On the other hand, for an ordinary acquired cultivator, it would take him 2,000 to 3,000 years of hard work to become a heaven immortal, the weakest of 36th tier. Only someone like Lu Qingfeng, who had no foundation in Great Yan Dynasty and did not have too many conflicts of interest, would be willing to collude with Nie Yaonu and her son. Using energy stone veins to exchange for Nie Yaonu and her son, who possessed a formidable overall strength, was something that Lu Qingfeng had no choice but to do if he wanted to have a foothold in Great Yan Imperial Court. Without a strong backing to deter others, incidents such as Taba Qingye's assassination and Qin Qingshui's framing would happen more and more in the future. In the middle of these 6 pillars was a pagoda-shaped flame seat, which was carved from an innate soul awakening wood, the size of an infant's head. For heaven immortals and even gold immortals, the innate soul awakening wood was an extremely rare treasure. It was not only because it contained a thread of innate wood energy, but more importantly, it had a unique divine power that could calm one's mind and stabilize one's aura. With an innate soul awakening wood supporting one would not have any inner demons aroused during one's cultivation, and would not have any distracting thoughts. The balance of one's aura would never have any deviation. Therefore, the progress of one's cultivation would be tremendous. Nie Yaonu noticed the surprised look in Wu Qi's eyes. She too raised her head and looked at the lamp, smiled complacently and said, "This is the dustless lamp, an extraordinary treasure left behind by our ancestral immortal. Within the light, there will be no dirt or dust, and no poisonous insects will be able to enter. When exercising and meditating under the light, no outer demons will be able to invade your body. The reason why I can have my current cultivation base is because of the great power of this treasure." Nie Yaonu took a deep breath, took over the turtle shell with an extremely solemn expression, then spun and looked at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng dared not to show any neglect. Hastily, he lifted his long robe and knelt down respectfully before Nye Yaonu. Nye Yaonu nodded her head satisfyingly. Holding the turtle shell with both hands, she said with a solemn expression, "Qingfeng, this is one of the two unique sword formations of our sect, the arts of heaven patching formation. With my innate talent, I can only inherit the sword technique passed down by our ancestral immortal. As for this arts of heaven patching formation, I will have to rely on you to carry it forward." After worshipping immortal Zhenyi, with a solemn expression, Nye Yaonu once again knelt down and kowtowed 9 times before the huge portrait. After that, she murmured a prayer under her breath and cast a beam of light onto the portrait. On the portrait, the 8 trigrams formation held by Cactus Zhenyi suddenly flashed with a hazy gleam. Then, a turtle shell, about the size of a human head, sparkling and translucent like jade, glinting with a tricolored gleam, slowly flew out from the portrait. This was the biggest gain from taking Lu Qingfeng as their disciple. The innate talent of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong had determined that they were better at controlling flying swords to kill people. As for the Tao of formation, which required years of painstaking study, it was not their cup of tea. On the other hand, there was no disciple in heaven-breaking sword sect who could let them feel at ease to inherit the Tao of formation. Using the arts of heaven patching formation, which was of little value, to exchange for a few energy stone veins with an enormous reserve and high quality, this was a very profitable deal for both mother and son. Currently, heaven-breaking sword sect had to rely on the amount of energy stones allocated by the imperial clan of Great Yen Dynasty every year for their supply of energy stones. It was conceivable that as the 3rd son of the crown prince of Great Yen Dynasty, Yenli, he must have taken control of the distribution of energy stones. As a result, the close disciples and trusted disciples of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong could only rely on Yenli to get a few pieces of energy stones to support their cultivation. The Cave of Sword Stems from the Mind was an important place in heaven-breaking sword sect. If they were not the true loyal disciples, how would Nye Yaonu dare to bring them here? Therefore, the lack of energy stones had become the biggest bottleneck that limited the development of Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong's trusted disciples. When Yao Xiang kowtowed and bowed to immortal Zhenyi, officially performing the ceremony of joining the sect, Wu Qi couldn't help but sneer in his mind. Since that was the case, he would accept the benefits of this dustless lamp on behalf of heaven-breaking sword sect. After carefully planning, he would never leave this dustless lamp to heaven-breaking sword sect. Immediately, Wu Qi burst out into a loud laughter and said, "What are you talking about, Grand Elder? This is the mineral vein in our young master's territory. How he wants to mine it, and who he wants to give it to, isn't it just a matter of a word? Even if the energy stone mine is under the control of Great Yen Dynasty, it is, after all, supplied to heaven-breaking sword sect. So, this is not a taboo. Even if someone wants to make a fuss, Zhanglu, what do you think about this?" It was a pity that Nye Yaonu was sitting on a mountain of treasure, but she didn't know how to appreciate it. Was she really just going to use this dustless lamp to help her with her cultivation? Especially when Jin Dan attained the Mahayana realm in the future, and was about to form his nascent soul, there would be a Yin tribulation from the outer heavens. If he had a thread of divine flame of order in his body, it would be a joke if any Yin devil dared to invade him. Once the divine flame of order was unleashed, it would be able to refine the invisible Yin devil into the purest soul energy particles, allowing Wu Qi to absorb them and strengthen his soul. Therefore, he would never let go of this divine flame of order. Slowly, Wu Qi, Nye Baihong, and Princess Zhanglu retreated to a side, watching quietly. If not for Lu Qingfeng, Duke Yenlu, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, Nye Yaonu and her son would really like to recruit some members of the imperial clan as their disciples. But, how could anyone really have the courage to be their disciple? With Yenli in heaven-breaking sword sect, many descendants of the nobles and ministers of Great Yen Dynasty had naturally become his disciples. Who would have the courage to give even a piece of energy stone to Nye Yaonu and her son? Chapter 110. Ji City was divided into 17 districts from the inside to the outside. Naturally, the core of the district was the Palace City, where the Imperial Palace was located. Outside the palace city, from Inner 1 to Inner 6, the people who lived in these 6 districts were the nobles and important ministers of Great Yen dynasty. Outside the 6 inner cities, from Middle 1 to Middle 6, the people who lived in these 6 districts were the wealthy merchants and influential clans. Outside the 6 middle cities, the people who lived in all the outer cities were the common people and ordinary merchants. It was the largest market of 4 seas, that brought together countless rare and precious products from Great Yen dynasty and over 100 vassal kingdoms. It was located in the eastern part of Middle 1, occupying a total of 50 blocks and tens of thousands of shops of various sizes. It was located close to the inner city, which made it convenient for the nobles and princes to go out and purchase all kinds of rare and precious items. At the same time, it was also convenient for the merchants in the 6 middle cities to take care of their business. On top of that, because it was located deep within Ji City, it was very safe, as no one dared to cause trouble here. After Lu Qingfeng had inherited the script of heaven patching formation and had a feast of spirit fruits and fine wine produced in the Immortal's Cave of Swords stems from the mind in heaven-breaking sword sect, the company returned to Ji City. It was almost evening. Lu Qingfeng brought his men and went straight to Duke Yan Li's mansion, while Wu Qi brought Meng Xiaobai and a few burly men from Meng village and went straight to the market of 4 seas, planning to buy some useful things. As Princess Zhanglu had just formed her Jin Dan, before her Jin Dan was stabilized, she could bring her guards and wander around during the day. But when night fell, she would have to cultivate her Jin Dan and stabilize her cultivation. Therefore, although she was reluctant to part with Wu Qi, she could only pout her lips and return to the palace city with the group of guards. The market of 4 seas was the only market in Ji City that did not have a curfew at night. Regardless of day or night, this place was always crowded with people, and all kinds of trades of various sizes were taking place all the time. It was reasonable. Many of the products in the market of 4 seas were priceless treasures that were worth tens of thousands of gold coins. Sometimes, trading at night would bring enough privacy to both parties. With the token of 7 swallows given to him by Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi was not worried about entering the city later. Even if the city gates of the inner city were closed at night, as long as he flashed the token of 7 swallows, he would be able to enter the inner city. Therefore, he brought Meng Xiaobai and the others to the market of 4 seas to trade. The streets of the market of 4 seas were spacious and clean. The streets were paved with stones and were about 100 feet wide. Endless streams of people and carriages could be seen everywhere. The architectural style of market of 4 seas was much bolder and novel compared to the other districts in Ji City. With just a glance, one could see tall and luxurious buildings with 7, 8, and even more than 10 stories. Merchant buildings that were built with all kinds of precious wood and rare stone materials could be found everywhere. Some of the larger merchant groups even had a large number of beautiful jade and precious stones inlaid on the buildings, which were especially dazzling under the sunlight. Right after Wu Qi brought Meng Xiaobai and the others into the market of 4 seas, a few figures dashed out from a 3-storied wooden building at the crossroad. A middle-aged man dressed in a green outfit was the quickest. He rushed to Wu Qi's side, bowed and said, "Young master, is this your first time coming to the market of 4 seas? Do you need to purchase any rare marine products or rare treasures from the mountains?" "It's not that I, Hai Yuntian, want to boast, but there are over 57,000 shops and merchant groups in this market of 4 seas, and I'm familiar with every single one of them." The few figures who dashed out from behind Hai Yuntian saw that he had started a conversation with Wu Qi. They immediately smiled and shook their heads, then returned to the wooden building. Wu Qi gave Hai Yuntian a look, who was clad in a green outfit and had a black token hanging on his waist. He nodded his head and said, "Are you the official broker of Market of 4 Seas?" Hai Yuntian kept nodding his head. He took out the black wooden medallion hanging on his waist and showed it to Wu Qi, pointing at the symbol of 5 dark green eyes on the wooden medallion complacently. He smiled and said, "Young master, I'm the rare 5 eyes broker in the Market of 4 Seas. Young master, you have to know that we, the official brokers, have different levels as well. With each level, we'll have 1 more eye engraved on our identity token. 7 eyes is the highest level, but only the managers of those top-grade merchant groups, Old Chow Fong, can have that level. For people like us, who specialize in guiding customers and making deals, 5 eyes is already the highest level. Wu Qi nodded his head and said disapprovingly, I don't care how many eyes you are, as long as you can help me find the things I need. Soul-breaking, dust barrier, 1,000-year purple gold-striped spider silk, deep-sea merman oil. Wu Qi listed out dozens of rare materials in a row, then turned to Hai Yuntian and said, can you find all these things? If not, you have to have at least the first 4. Hai Yuntian's lips moved slightly, while his fingers kept moving. After the span of a few breaths, his eyes brightened, then he bowed and said, young master, you've asked the right person. Soul-breaking is a special wood that can kill all kinds of bugs, dust barrier is a magical grass that can stabilize one's mind, purple gold-striped spider silk is the best material for making all kinds of soft armors, and merman oil is used to make sacrificial lamps that can last for tens of thousands of years in tombs. After giving out a long list of information, Hai Yuntian smiled and said, except for the last few things, I've never heard of them before. Young master, don't worry about the others, I can find them in the market of 4 seas. Wu Qi was delighted. If he could find less than half of these things, or even just the first 4 materials, he would be able to make a new spirit lamp and take away all the pre-world spirit items contained in it. He didn't expect that he could find more than 90% of the required materials in the market of 4 seas. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. Good, very good. With this, Wu Qi was fully confident that even if he took away the 3 pre-world spirit items contained in the dustless lamp, no one would notice anything wrong. The dustless lamp would still be the dustless lamp. Nodding approvingly, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, lead the way now. Get me as many as you can find. Hai Yuntian responded hurriedly, then led Wu Qi and walked forward along the street. Not long after that, he led Wu Qi to a tea house that was exquisitely decorated, but not luxurious. He asked Wu Qi to reserve a private room in the tea house, then hurriedly trotted out of the tea house. For example, these strange creatures that Wu Qi wanted to buy, if one were to talk about their practical use, ordinary people wouldn't be able to use them. Generally speaking, only those young masters of rich and powerful families who like to hunt for novelty would like to make these things to show off in front of others. Therefore, the value of these things was extremely high. Wu Qi wanted to buy dozens of these rare and precious things in one go, which were rarely seen by ordinary people. Adding up the price of all these things, it would be an enormous figure that would make one speechless. This was a genuine and important customer. Since he was an important customer, he naturally couldn't let Wu Qi run from shop to shop to purchase these things. As a qualified official broker, Hai Yuntian would inform the shopkeepers of the relevant shops, and have them deliver all kinds of goods to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was very clear that this was also the way of survival for an official broker like Hai Yuntian. Some rare and precious items wouldn't only be available in a single shop, it was very likely that tens or hundreds of shops would have them. Hai Yuntian would inform a shop to deliver the goods, and this would be his favor. So, he would naturally take a share of the profits afterward. However, without such an official broker, if Wu Qi had to visit several tens of thousands of shops by himself, how long would it take him to gather all the materials he needed? How could it be like now, sitting in a tea house and drinking tea, and before long, someone would deliver the goods to his door? Not long after that, Hai Yuntian, with his forehead covered in sweat, led 3 shopkeepers into the private room of the tea house. These shopkeepers had simple and honest faces, but a bright gleam could be seen flickering in their eyes from time to time. They bowed to Wu Qi with a smile on their face. All 3 shopkeepers reached out their hands and swiped on their fingers. Amidst a bright gleam, several dozens of jade boxes and wooden boxes of different sizes appeared on the floor of the private room. These shopkeepers actually owned storage rings, which were extremely rare magical items. Wu Qi couldn't help but have his lips twitch. This was how a big merchant of Ji City should behave. Hai Yuntian bent his waist and carefully opened up the wooden boxes, revealing all kinds of goods inside. A blue gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He threw away the teacup, carefully walked to the front of these goods and gave them a thorough examination. They were all rare and precious materials according to the amount he asked for, and the quality of the goods was much higher than what he asked for. For example, the quality of the purple gold spider silk was produced by a purple gold spider that was at least 1,500 years old. The oil of the deep-sea merman was sticky like a paste and had a pleasant aroma. It was not only the oil of the merman, but also the oil extracted from the body of a demon among the mermen who had achieved some achievements in cultivation. Very good. Wu Qi praised. He gave the three shopkeepers a glance, who had a complacent expression on their faces, smiled and asked, "If I may ask, do you want to pay with gold and silver, or what?" One of the shopkeepers nodded his head and smiled, "Young master, you can pay with gold and silver, or energy stones. Spirit pills, magical items, and anything else, there is nothing we won't accept." After a brief moment of silence, the shopkeeper glanced at all the goods on the floor and gave out a price. If they were to pay with gold and silver, the total value of these dozens of goods would be 500 gold coins. If they were to pay with energy stones, it would cost 500 upper-grade energy stones. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi took out a huge amount of gold, silver, and jewelry from his storage ring. These were all the private wealth that the former mayor of Little Meng City, Yi Yan, and his brothers had obtained by plundering the land. Now, they had all become Wu Qi's personal property. Gold and silver jewelry didn't have much value to a cultivator, so Wu Qi didn't want to use the upper-grade water element energy stones given by Princess Zhanglu to pay for them. A big pile of gold, silver, and jewels was piled up. With their sharp eyes, the three managers could tell with just one glance that Wu Qi would only give them more valuables, not less. Immediately, they thanked Wu Qi and put away all the money. Wu Qi waved his hand and stored all the goods into his storage ring. The three shopkeepers bid their farewells and left the tea house in a hurry. After that, Wu Qi gave Hai Yuntian a generous tip and left his contact information. After that, he brought Meng Xiaobai and the others and left the tea house. Hai Yuntian still followed beside him attentively, sending Wu Qi off from the market of Four Seas. He promised that if Wu Qi ever needed any rare and precious items in the future, he could just come to the market of Four Seas and look for him, and he would definitely get it done properly for Wu Qi. Just from today's transaction, from the total value of 500,000 gold coins, Hai Yuntian could get a commission of 5,000 gold coins. In any vassal kingdom of Great Yan dynasty, this was the entire wealth of a small noble clan. Since Hai Yuntian had gotten such a huge commission out of nowhere, how could he not take good care of his customers? While chatting with Hai Yuntian, Wu Qi was enjoying the scenery of the market of Four Seas. When they were strolling on the street, Wu Qi suddenly heard a loud noise coming from a restaurant on the side of the road, and a man singing with a loud and desolate voice, "The wind is blowing, the water is cold, the warrior will never return." Upon hearing the singing, Wu Qi was startled, quickly turning his head and looking towards the direction of the restaurant. A burly man happened to stretch half of his body out from the window on the third floor of the restaurant, grabbing a wine jar and throwing it towards Wu Qi's head. The man pointed his finger at Wu Qi and shouted, "Hey, kid, I know you. Come up here, have a drink with Lao Tzu." The wine jar brushed past Wu Qi's nose and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Wu Qi gave the burly man a glance, rolled his eyes, and walked back into the restaurant grumpily. Chapter 111. At the four corners of the lobby, a few muscular men were standing there, glaring at Wu Qi like a tiger watching its prey. When Wu Qi walked into the lobby, these men immediately glared at him fiercely, their eyes never leaving his body. Although these men looked inconspicuous at first glance, each of them was an expert of body-strengthening tier of Xiantian realm. Their gazes were as sharp as blades, and if an ordinary merchant were to be stared at by them, they might suffer an internal injury. No wonder there was not a single customer in this lobby. Wu Qi had gulped down 4 jars of strong wine. The acquired energies of 5 elements cultivated with the qi circulating technique of 5 elements were circulating rapidly in his meridians, transforming the powerful medicinal strength contained in the wine into surging innate energies. He looked at Yen Dan, laughed out loud and said, "This is the Tower of Heroes, not the Tower of Black Bears." When a hero meets the emperor, should he kneel down and greet him? If that is the case, I don't need to come to this Tower of Heroes. Wu Qi can just go to the imperial palace and kowtow to the emperor. Wu Qi threw a glance at the group of people, who were enjoying themselves. Without saying a word, he walked to the fireplace and sat right next to Gao Jianli, who was singing at the top of his lungs. He picked up a wine jar and gave a toast to Yen Dan from a distance. After that, he raised the wine jar up and gulped down at least 15 liters of strong wine. Using his innate water energy, he quickly wrapped up the wine and dissolved the alcohol. Wu Qi burped and sprayed out a mouthful of alcohol. Suddenly, his eyes became extremely bright. After giving Wu Qi a glance, Yen Dan said with a deep voice, "Since the founding of Great Yen Dynasty over 2,000 years ago, countless members of imperial clan have died. But, my son, Buji, is the first clan leader of Great Yen Dynasty, and the first Duke of Great Yen Dynasty to be assassinated. This case will be investigated by Gao Jianli and Chief General Jing Ke, and you will be responsible for assisting them. Find out who is the one who dares to assassinate Yen Buji." Leading a group of burly men, Qin Wuyang, the founder of Qin clan of Great Yen Dynasty, was standing next to the 2-feet-tall platform. Qin Wuyang, who had a handsome face and a tall and valiant stature, seemed to be in his 30s, was carrying a wine jar in his hand. While cheering for Jing Ke, he was drinking to his heart's content. It was unknown whether it was because of the alcohol or some other reason, but his eyes had turned red. Jing Ke's roar shook the hero tower a few times. Gao Jianli threw away the musical instrument in his hand, picked up a jar of liquor, and gulped it down. Looking at the back view of Fairski leaving in a panic, Wu Qi could not help but find it funny. He had just told Wu Qi that the hero tower was full of strange and evil qi. A few iron chains were hanging down from the ceiling, and a huge wild bull was being roasted to a golden and fragrant state. Inside the fireplace was a pile of fire elemental energy stones, which were stimulated by a formation. Even flames kept bursting out from these energy stones, making the wild bull squeak noisily while fat kept dripping down from it. In the main hall of the second floor, a few tables were occupied by a few guests. These guests were all clad in dark green soft armors and cloaks, with sharp swords or single-edged long blades hanging on their waist. They were all the expert guards of the palace guards. Especially the few palace guards who were guarding near the stairway leading to the third floor. They had the cultivation base of peak stage embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm, and one of them had stepped into the realm of Jin Dan. Next to Yue, there was an old man with a simple and unsophisticated appearance, who was currently cutting a braised pig's head with a dagger while gnashing his teeth. He should be Tian Guang, who also had the title of general, and was conferred the title of Prince of Great Yen Dynasty with a different surname, and was given the fief of 5 provinces. When Wu Qi said those words, the faces of Yen Dan, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and a few other men instantly fell. Yen Dan smiled. He threw away the roast goose, grabbed a jar of wine and toasted Wu Qi, then he too drank the wine in one gulp. The wine was mixed with some unknown herbs, which could greatly replenish one's vitality. The wine that Wu Qi drank had at least increased his cultivation base of the foundational cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, by 30 years. With his eyes glowing brightly, Wu Qi let out a loud laugh, threw away the empty jar, picked up another jar of wine and gulped it down. It was rare to see someone taking advantage of others for free. If he didn't seize this opportunity to drink a few more jars of wine, wouldn't he be wasting this opportunity? Picking up a jar of wine, Jing Ke came before Wu Qi, bowed his head and looked at Wu Qi, who was holding the wine jar and drinking to his heart's content. He laughed out loud and said, "What an interesting young lad, and you do have some guts. Those descendants of ours, those good-for-nothings, would have their legs turn soft when they saw us. Yet, you, a young lad, can talk and laugh in front of us. You do have some guts. A sharp gleam flashed in Jing Ke's eyes, as he stared at Wu Qi and shouted, "Those illegitimate sons of Yan Buji, who killed them?" Yan Dan rose to his feet, came before Wu Qi while emanating a strong smell of wine. There was once a young master from some vassal kingdom who came to this Tower of Heroes and stirred up trouble, but in the end, they had their limbs broken and thrown out. After that incident, this Tower of Heroes was still open for business, and nothing serious happened. Hai Yuntian had told Wu Qi that, if it was not necessary, he should never get involved with the people in this tower. In this spacious room, apart from the demon bear who was fighting with Jing Ke on the platform, who glared at Wu Qi furiously, Qin Wuyang was the only one who kept throwing hostile glances at Wu Qi. All the others were laughing out loud, raising up their wine cups and drinking to their heart's content. This Hai Yuntian is a man with a kind heart. Wu Qi smiled sheepishly. He was thinking to himself that if he wanted to buy something in the future, he could just look for him directly. As for the backer and all sorts of strange deeds of this Tower of Heroes, one could easily tell from the man who showed his head and smashed the wine jars just now. The mighty chief general of Great Yan Dynasty, Jing Ke, was standing in the tower and smashing wine jars. It was not hard to imagine the background of this Tower of Heroes. Seeing that Wu Qi was about to walk into the Tower of Heroes, Hai Yuntian's expression changed rapidly. He pondered for a while, then hastily stopped Wu Qi, said a few words to him, and was about to take his leave. But before he spun and left, Hai Yuntian finally gave Wu Qi a hurried murmur under his breath out of kindness. After that, he spun and left hastily. Gao Jianli suddenly stopped smashing the wine jars, looked at Wu Qi, laughed and said, "Well said. This is the Tower of Heroes, not the Tower of Kowtowing." He he. Using the spirit flame ignited by the fire element energy stones to grill the beast, what a generous method. Wu Qi stared at the huge fire pit, which had a diameter of over 50 feet. He could not help but have his mouth twitch. How many energy stones would it cost to grill a wild bull with this method? Couldn't they just use charcoal instead? Meng Xiaobai and the others were stopped, and only Wu Qi was allowed to step onto the stairs and go up to the third floor. Jing Ke narrowed his eyes, sneered, and said, "We don't care about the life and death of those guys. But, is the death of Yan Buji related to your young master?" A thick, crooked wooden board was hung above the crude door of the restaurant, and 3 large characters, Tower of Heroes, were carved on it. At first glance, the handwriting looked like it was made by a chicken claw, messy and extremely ugly to look at. Only those with a sufficient cultivation base could pay close attention to the handwriting, and only then would they be able to see a wisp of extremely strong will hidden in the handwriting, an unyielding spirit that seemed to swear to poke a hole in the sky. Jing Ke, who had just smashed a wine jar on the street and called Wu Qi to come upstairs, was seen swaying on a platform in the innermost part of the restaurant, wrestling with a demon bear that stood over 20 feet tall and had a full body of greenish-golden scales. A cold green gleam shone from the demon bear's eyes, and there was a faint halo that shrouded its body. Obviously, it had also transformed into the Jin Dan, a demon immortal who had gained human nature. The bear was spitting saliva, howling and struggling with Jing Ke. The man and the beast were pouncing on each other, causing the entire restaurant to shake violently. Wu Qi rolled his eyes, sneered at Jing Ke and said, "Just because of this question. Didn't the scouting office manage to find out the truth? In order to let our young master inherit the title of Duke, Yan Lu, Tai clan, and Lu clan of Lu Kingdom joined hands and killed those young masters. What's so strange about that?" After giving Wu Qi a thorough once-over, these waiters snorted deeply and watched as Wu Qi and his company walked up the stairs and came to the second floor of the restaurant. He smashed the wine jar forcefully on the ground and broke it into pieces. Yan Dan laughed out loud and said, "Little fellow, your name is Wu Qi. Aren't you afraid of meeting me? Aren't you going to kneel down and greet me?" Throwing the wine jar away, Wu Qi sprung to his feet, pointed his finger at Jing Ku and said with a smile, "Why did Chief General say that?" Putting everything aside, with the overall strength of Tai clan and Lu clan, do you think they can kill Yen Buji? If Chief General wants to investigate the case, please don't start with our young master. Wu Qi admitted that we have killed a group of young masters who have not been acknowledged yet. But, the death of the former Duke Yen Le has nothing to do with our young master. Jing Ku gave a loud shout, kicked the demon bear a few steps back, wiped off his sweat and walked down from the platform. The demon bear threw his head back and let out a gloomy roar into the sky. Slowly, his body twisted and turned, transforming into a burly man with a dark green body. Then, he sat down on the platform with a gloomy expression. When Wu Qi mentioned the Black Bear House, he had greatly offended this demon bear. Wu Qi gave Jing Ku and Yi Yen a deep look, smiled faintly and said, "Chief General, did you ask Wu Qi to come up here just to frighten a little fellow? No matter how bored Chief General is, I don't think you would be that bored." Chapter 112. Are you afraid? With both hands clasped behind his back, Yen Dan turned his head and stared blankly at a small patch of sky outside the window. The sky was filled with a bright red glow. Layers of fish-scale clouds were spreading out, and flocks of birds were flying back and forth in the clouds at top speed. A few sky-patrolling Eagle Guards of Scouting Office were seen wheeling in the sky, their bodies shrouded in a faint blue glow. Occasionally, a bright gleam could be seen flickering in their eyes as they glanced down at the ground. "Little fellow, I, Yen Dan, own the land of Great Yen spanning hundreds of thousands of miles, over 100 vassal kingdoms, thousands of cities of different sizes that have yet to be built, and billions of people under my rule. I, Yen Dan, have tens of millions of mighty soldiers, hundreds of thousands of cultivators, and tens of thousands of human immortals who have formed the Jin Dan. I, Yen Dan, have been cultivating arduously for over 2,000 years, and my cultivation base has reached the limit of the Jin Dan realm. With just one more step, I will form my nascent soul, and I will have the hope of living a free and unfettered life." Taking a deep breath, Yen Dan fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, sneered, and said, "With such a strong power of the nation, and such a strong cultivation base, what is there for Yen Dan to be afraid of?" Looking at Yen Dan's solemn face, his flickering eyes, and the hesitation in his eyes, Wu Qi took a deep breath and said, "If you are not afraid, why is your majesty so nervous about the death of Duke Yen Lu? Great Yen has been peaceful for over 2,000 years, but it doesn't mean that it will remain peaceful forever. Humans have their own emotions, and all kinds of gratitude and grudges will be entangled. Don't tell me that no one dares to assassinate Duke Yen Lu." Wu Qi continued, "It is perfectly normal for Duke Yen Lu to be assassinated. It could be done by any of the 8 princes, or any monarch of a vassal kingdom, or any member of the imperial clan, or any noble. It could also be that Yen Buji had stolen the wife of an expert, and was killed by that person as revenge. With the death of a duke from the imperial clan, why is your majesty so nervous? If that is not fear, then what is it?" He smiled faintly, grabbed a jar of strong wine next to his feet, and gulped it down. After that, he burped and continued, "Your majesty has been cultivating for over 2,000 years, and you have already reached the limit of Gold Core realm? Jin Dan human immortals can live up to 800 years, and your majesty must have consumed countless life-prolonging spirit pills to live until now. However, when I saw your majesty riding on a flying sword a few days ago, the ripples of energy emanating from your majesty's body were as strong as the combined force of over 100 human immortals." He took a deep breath, stared straight into Yen Dan's eyes, and cried out, "If your majesty is not afraid of something, why does your heart feel so stagnant?" His Majesty's dermic power and cultivation base were comparable to the joint effort of over 100 human immortals of Gold Core realm. If it were someone else, he or she would have long formed 10 nascent souls. If your Majesty is not, if you are not, unable to kill the devil in your heart, then why are you hesitating for so many years at the limit of the Jin Dan realm? Yen Dan, Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and Chi Chi took a deep breath. The joints in their bodies twisted and their muscles tightened, producing buzzing noises that sounded like the vibration of the strings of a zither. A strong dark green gleam shone from Yen Dan's eyes as he stared fixedly at Wu Qi and said coldly, "There is a devil in Yen Dan's heart. Why is Yen Dan not aware of it?" After over 2,000 years of laborious cultivation, he still could not break through the Jin Dan realm, because... Yen Dan opened his mouth and stared blankly at the ceiling. He had nothing to say. A Jin Dan realm human immortal could live up to 800 years. Within 800 years, an ordinary cultivator would either form his nascent soul, transform into an earth immortal, and live a free and unfettered life, gaining an additional 3,000 years of life. Or, they would have died long ago, leaving only a thread of their soul in the cycle of transmigration. However, no matter it was Yen Dan, Jing Ku, or Gao Jianli, the energy accumulated in their bodies was at least 100 times greater than that of an ordinary Jin Dan realm human immortal. Although their cultivation base was close to the extreme, they still could not break through their gold cores and form their nascent souls. If not because they were the few most important core members of Great Yen Dynasty, and were supplied with a large amount of life-prolonging spirit herbs, Yen Dan and his companions would have turned into ashes over 1,000 years ago. So what if you already possess a formidable energy equivalent to a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator when you were still in the Jin Dan realm? Since they could not form their nascent souls, their lifespan was only 800 years, and their overall strength could only be considered as an abnormal human immortal. Shaking his head, Wu Qi gave Yen Dan a look, then turned to Jing Ku and Gao Jianli. "The wind is blowing, the water is cold, and the brave warrior will never return. What a magnificent spirit! What a peerless hero! You have the courage to unleash a strike that can slay a dragon. To be able to sing such a song and do such a deed, Chief General and Deputy Prime Minister are both heroes, possessing great wisdom, courage, and willpower. So, why can't you see through that little devil in your heart and take another step forward? It is nothing more than breaking your gold core and forming your nascent soul. What is there to be afraid of?" Just like Yen Dan, Gao Jianli had his mouth wide open, but he couldn't make any sound for a long while. On the other side, Jing Ku's eyes shone with a golden gleam. Suddenly, he threw his head back and laughed, "You're right, little boy. In those years, Lao Tzu dared to assassinate him with only a dagger in his hand. So, what is there to be afraid of now? Your Majesty, the great Yen you have now, is it the great Yen of those years? You now have a mighty army of 10 million soldiers, and over 10 billion people. Are you still afraid of that man? In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line, let alone now. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of?" Gao Jianli let out a long and loud cry as well. Vaguely, there was the sound of metal clashing, resounding through the clouds. He cried out sternly, "What Jing Ku said is right. In those years, we were able to fight with our lives on the line, not to mention that we are not necessarily weaker than him today. Your Majesty, don't you forget that after that man's death, he was deserted by all his people, and did not even have a trusted follower. On the other hand, we have this group of brothers, and the spirit of brotherhood. With us together, why should we be afraid of him?" Both Jing Ku and Gao Jianli's clothes were ripped and torn at the same time, while large patches of skin on their bodies cracked and disintegrated. Vaguely, new skin as fair as jade was growing out from under their cracked skin, emitting a strong golden gleam. Vaguely, cracking noises could be heard coming from their dantian, while waves of powerful and suffocating energy kept rushing out from their bodies, rolling and rocking wantonly within the Tower of Heroes. Suddenly, a large sheet of bright light burst out from within the Tower of Heroes, as countless talismans and formation diagrams rushed out, tightly restraining the energy waves emanating from both men within the tower. Even though the inside of the tower had been thrown into a mess by the energy waves unleashed by Jing Ku and Gao Jianli, the people outside the tower did not feel anything. Suddenly, Qin Wuyang and Tian Guang threw their heads back and let out a long and loud cry into the sky. "Little boy, your words have awakened us. We are not the same as we were in the past. The man today is not the same as he was in the past. We have gone through all kinds of hardships to build the foundation we have today, and we are now at the peak of the power of the dynasty, with a strong army. So, why should we be afraid of him? Tian Guang raised up a blue longsword and sprayed out a stream of sword energy into the sky. The skin on his body exploded as well, while an enormous sword energy shot out from his dantian. Qin Wuyang's long hair stood straight up, while two strong beams shot out from his eyes that were as sharp as swords. A bright light flickered and flickered around his body. Just like the few others, he quickly entered the process of breaking his gold core and forming his nascent soul. Yen Dan stared blankly at Wu Qi. After a long while, he suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, Wu Qi, I never thought that you are actually the opportunity for us to break through the inner devil and become an earth immortal. Yes, what is Dan afraid of? Is he afraid of death? Many years ago, my head was chopped off by my father and sent to that man on a golden tray. My soul was roaring and roaring furiously in the head, but what could I do? I've already died once, yet I still can't see through this after over 2,000 years of hard work. What a waste of 2,000 years of painstaking cultivation. An energy ripple that was much stronger and stronger than that of Jing Ke and the others was slowly rippling out from Yen Dan's body. The skin on Yen Dan's body was also breaking off piece by piece, revealing the newly born skin underneath that was as fair as jade and glowing with a dazzling glow. Yen Dan took a deep breath, murmuring to himself with a voice that sounded as if he was immersed in enjoyment, Come. If you are the same as Dan and have come to this place, let us continue our destined war. This time, Dan will definitely chop off your head, place it on a tray and admire it day and night. And this time, Dan will never lose to you again. The Great Yen Dynasty today is not the Great Yen Dynasty of the past. The Emperor of Great Yen Dynasty today is me, Ji Dan, and not that father of mine. Dan has brothers, a code of brotherhood, countless clans, tens of billions of people, a boundless land, tens of millions of mighty armies, and countless generals. What is there for Dan to be afraid of? Laughing wildly, Yen Dan fished out a token of 8 swallows from his sleeve and threw it over to Wu Qi, then cried out in a deep voice, Ma Yi, record this imperial decree. Confer Wu Qi with the title of Marquis Tianyun of Great Yen Dynasty, and grant him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty. Ma Yi, with a red face and a height of over 10 feet, appeared out of nowhere and answered with a solemn expression. His eyes were filled with admiration and envy when he looked at Wu Qi. With some nonsense, he had tricked a few of the most important people in Great Yen Dynasty into breaking their gold cores and forming their nascent souls, officially stepping into the realm of Earth Immortals. He had even given himself the title of Marquis Tianyun, granting him 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty. The luck of this Wu Qi was so good that it was infuriating. Huayang Dynasty was the most famous land of fish and rice in Great Yen Dynasty, one of the commercial centers. Not only was it rich in products, the annual tax revenue was also an astronomical figure. Although Wu Qi only granted 130 cities of Huayang Dynasty, the annual tax revenue from it was roughly equal to the income of 1/3 of an ordinary province. In Great Yen Dynasty, unless one was from a meritorious clan or a member of the imperial clan, it was extremely difficult for anyone to obtain the lowest title of nobility. How could it be as easy as Wu Qi? With just a few words, he had become a marquis. Ma Yi glared fiercely at Wu Qi, whose face was filled with a smile, and narrowed his eyes. The ripples of energy emanating from Yen Dan's body were getting stronger and stronger, and the frequency was getting faster and faster. He forcefully suppressed the energy tide in his body, beckoned at the demon bear sitting on the platform and said, Xiong Qing, you and a few of your brothers will be working for Marquis Tianyun today. Be careful and work hard. Don't be greedy for wine, don't hurt anyone without reason, and don't transform into a demon at midnight and fool around in the beast park of Imperial Palace. Do you understand? The tall and burly man, Xiong Qing, was struck dumb. With a frown on his face, he came next to Wu Qi reluctantly, cupped his fist and bowed to Yen Dan with a low, muffled voice. Yan Dan smiled at Wu Qi, pointed his finger at Xiong Qing and said, "This fellow and his brothers are a total of 12 demon bears who have transformed into human form. Their skin and flesh are tough, and they can be of some use. You can use them as well. Let them work for you in the future." After assigning Xiong Qing to Wu Qi, Yan Dan's expression changed abruptly. Hastily, he ordered Wu Qi and his men to leave at once. After that, a few beams flashed across the sky, as he, Jing Ke, and all the other men had transformed into beams and disappeared without a trace. When breaking the gold core, forming the nascent soul and stepping into the realm of Earth Immortal, there would be a thunder tribulation. No one knew where Yan Dan and his men had gone to, as they had to rely on the defensive formations that they had prepared beforehand to transcend the tribulation. So, how could they have the time to argue with Wu Qi here? Wu Qi weighed the token of 8 swallows in his hand, and couldn't help but let out a loud laugh. With this token, he could absolutely do whatever he wanted in Ji City, right? Then, he turned to look at Xiong Qing, who had a reluctant expression on his face. This fellow had 11 brothers. And all of them were demon bears who had transformed into human form. That was a total of 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan. Demons, these were real demons, and this was the first time in Wu Qi's life that he had seen a demon that only existed in the legends. However, Wu Qi had unintentionally offended this big black bear with his words just now. After pondering for a while, he patted on Xiong Qing's shoulder. "Big brother Xiong Qing, from now on, you can follow Wu Qi. You can eat big bowls of wine, eat big chunks of meat, and hack people with a big blade. Wu Qi will guarantee you a happy life." After a brief pause, Wu Qi let out a strange laugh and said, "With the token of 8 swallows, big brother Xiong Qing can go to the beast park and fool around in the bear den at midnight. Wu Qi will personally clear the way for you." Upon hearing what Wu Qi said, Xiong Qing, who had a bellyful of anger just a moment ago, smiled sweetly and hugged Wu Qi, calling him a good brother. Chapter 113. Deep in the night, a loud snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was heard coming out from Duke Yan Li's mansion, shaking the ground and making it tremble slightly. Just now, when Wu Qi returned to the mansion, he briefly told Lu Qingfeng about what happened today. When Lu Qingfeng learned that Wu Qi was conferred the title of Marquis Tianyun by Yan Dan, and was given the fief of 130 cities, while also assigning 12 demon bears who had formed the Jin Dan to follow Wu Qi, he couldn't help but let out a loud cry of joy. Hastily, he ordered his men to prepare good wine and meat and served them to him. A grand banquet was held in Duke Yan Li's mansion to celebrate Wu Qi's great fortune today. As a result, under Wu Qi's intentional action, Lu Qingfeng, Xiong Qing, and a few other men were half-dead drunk, and were now sleeping soundly in their rooms. The snoring that sounded like rolling thunder was coming from Xiong Qing and his brothers. When these 12 demon bears were drunk, they would transform into bears. When 12 huge black bears, each with a height of 20 to 30 feet, were snoring together, the snoring would definitely make a man with a weak nervous system feel so painful that he would want to commit suicide. Wu Qi viciously speculated, "Is this the reason why Yan Dan so generously threw Xiong Qing and his brothers to me?" From the lake in the backyard, Wu Qi sucked out a hazy layer of water vapor. Using the cover of the water vapor, he transformed into a sharp arrow and sped out of Duke Yan Li's mansion, heading straight towards Mount White Sun outside the city. Upon leaving the city, Wu Qi took out a lower-tier magical item flying sword and transformed into a 3 feet long, blurry sword beam. Carefully sticking close to the bushes and trees, he flew all the way towards Mount White Sunday. While flying on the flying sword, Wu Qi kept marveling at what he had seen and heard today. Because of the devil in their hearts, Yan Dan and his brothers hadn't been able to break through the Jin Dan realm. Just a few words of nonsense had actually allowed them to successfully break through. He really didn't know what they had been cultivating for over 2,000 years. There were also the 12 Xiong Qing brothers. They were monsters, real monsters, bear demons who had formed the Jin Dan. If they were on Earth, they would definitely be captured and dissected for research. They might even be locked in an iron cage and have hundreds of milliliters of bear bile extracted every day. This was bear bile produced by a demonic bear that had turned into a spirit. Its effects were much stronger than those of ordinary black bears. Monsters, they really are monsters. Wu Qi sighed again and again. He was amazed by the wonders of this world. In the blue sky, thin layers of white clouds slowly floated by. A large number of stars dotted the sky, illuminating the world. Wu Qi rode on the sword light and flew against the wind in this quiet night. He felt as if he was floating and out of this world. What a marvelous and magnificent world! Suddenly, Wu Qi had a sudden realization. His footsteps were definitely not limited to this great Yan dynasty, but this tiny piece of sky. In the future, he would definitely follow the various records in Scroll of Stealing, visiting all kinds of magical places, visiting them, and visiting them. He wanted to stand at the peak of this world, and then enjoy all kinds of more magnificent and incredible wonders. Great Yan dynasty was just a beginning, and it was far from the end. Within the water meridians in both his arms, 2 water element Jin Dan kept rushing out pure and condensed energies. Driven by the energies, Wu Qi's flying speed was at least 2 times faster than the single-horned deer. In just 15 minutes, he had arrived at the front gate of Mount White Sunday. Without alerting anyone, he went straight into the mountain. The defensive formation of Mount White Sun was repaired by someone later on. The highest level of formation that could be mastered by the masters of formation in Great Yan Dynasty was merely 8 pillars, which barely reached the level of 8 trigrams formation. Heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect didn't have any formation masters trained by themselves, and the formation masters hired from outside didn't do their best to set up the mountain-protecting formation for heaven-breaking swordsmanship sect. They could only set up a reverse 5 elements heavenly fire and ice formation, which consisted of 5 main pillars. Wu Qi simply ignored such a crude formation. He went through the defensive formation, avoided some small and exquisite defensive mechanisms, and carefully avoided a couple dozens of teams of heaven-breaking sword sect's disciples who were patrolling at night. Stealthily, Wu Qi arrived at the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. The surroundings were quiet and devoid of people. Wu Qi took a deep breath. Suddenly, a large sheet of water vapor rippled around him, transforming into a few wisps of drifting clouds. They rolled him up and brought him up to the top of the cliff along with a gust of night breeze. Wu Qi's body disappeared amidst the watery clouds. The watery cloud spell, a water elemental escape art from Scroll of Stealing, had concealed Wu Qi's figure. His body transformed into a drifting cloud, and without alerting the large flock of white cranes on the cliff, he arrived at the top of the cliff. The top of the cliff, which was smashed by the thunderbolts unintentionally unleashed by Princess Zhanglu during the day, had been filled up, and only the ancient pine trees that were smashed by the thunderbolts were nowhere to be seen. There was no one on the top of the cliff. Without hesitation, Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the sky, then hastily leaped into the cave of sword stems from the mind, striding past the few layers of defensive mechanisms and formation diagrams. It was as if the triple-layered illusory formation on the outer layer was nothing to him, while under the skillful control of Wu Qi's incantation, the formation formed by 108 pillars in the inner layer didn't play any role, and was easily crossed by him. At this moment, Wu Qi's eyes glowed with a deep sense of gratitude towards the man who taught him the Scroll of Stealing. Without the profound knowledge of formations found in the Scroll of Stealing, how could he come into this place so easily? After all, this was the core region of heaven-breaking sword sect, the sect that ranked first among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty. Stealthily, Wu Qi entered the cave. With a single step, he crossed the small river that was filled with an incredible amount of natural energies. He did not take the Jade Bridge, which was installed with at least 18 warning mechanisms. The cave was filled with natural energies, and the natural energies had condensed into a white mist, drifting in all directions. Transforming into a white cloud, Wu Qi quickly took a round in the cave along with the white mist. Very soon, he found out what the people in the cave were doing. Nye Baihong was not in the cave, and he should have his own residence as the sect leader. There were 16 Jin Dan human immortals in the cave. Among them, 2 of them were mid-stage Jin Dan cultivators, while the other 14 had just formed their Jin Dan. Each of them had occupied a pavilion, sitting in meditation and circulating their energy, preparing for the nighttime cultivation of a cultivator. In the deepest part of the cave, in a small crafting room that was built into the mountain wall, Nya Yaonu was seen crafting 3 flying swords that were glowing with a fiery glow with the flame of magma from the earth's core. As the energy of the magma from the earth's core was too strong, the surging flame energy spread out in all directions, nearly dispersing the invisible watery cloud. Wu Qi stole a glance at Nya Yaonu, who was wholeheartedly practicing her swords. After that, he dared not to look at her any longer, and hastily left the crafting room. With just a quick glance, Wu Qi had a rough idea of Nya Yaonu's crafting level. All 3 flying swords were made from pretty good materials, and they were made from the red child iron of fire and thunder extracted from the magma from the earth's core, which was at least 10,000 years old. It had an extremely strong and young nature, and was the best material for crafting fire element magical treasures. However, the 3 flying swords crafted by Nya Yaonu could at most reach the standard of upper-grade magical treasures, as the materials and supplementary materials used did not match with them. Judging from the sweaty look on Nya Yaonu's face, Wu Qi could tell that she had spent all her energy in crafting these 3 flying swords. However, crafting a magical treasure was a technical task that required talent and aptitude. Although Nya Yaonu had spent so much effort in crafting the swords, in the end, she could only craft 3 upper-grade magical treasures that were infinitely close to lower-grade magical treasures. With Wu Qi's vision after inheriting the scroll of stealing, he would not even bother to steal upper-grade magical treasures. Shaking his head, Wu Qi spun and entered the peerless pavilion of sword formation, walking slowly to the portrait of immortal Zhen Yi that was worshipped right in the middle of the pavilion. He gave immortal Zhen Yi a glance, who was riding on the back of a flood dragon and had his face blurred. Wu Qi bowed to him, then a watery cloud rushed out from under his feet. Soundlessly, it carried him up to one of the pillars on the roof, and carefully approached the dustless lamp. There are 3 types of innate spirit items in a dustless lamp. If these 3 innate spirit items are left behind by immortal Zhen Yi, then his tier is at least the same as the legendary primordial immortal. Those are innate spirit items. If he is not a primordial immortal, how could he get his hands on them? And how could he be so generous as to leave them behind for his juniors? However, the defensive formation left behind in the abode of a primordial immortal is really lousy. And the sword techniques left behind by him are missing the sword techniques of earth and fire. Is he trying to play a joke on his juniors? Although he left behind 3 innate spirit items, he is missing 2 sword techniques of 5 elements. I'm sure Yan Dan and his companions are the same Yan Dan I know, Jing Ke and Gao Jianli who assassinated Emperor Qin. But, how did they get here? Moreover, Yan Dan had said in the daytime that his head had been chopped off by his father and brought to the Qin Emperor. His soul was still in his head, so he had seen everything clearly. He is already dead, so how could he still be here? While all kinds of thoughts were running through his mind, Wu Qi was carefully dismantling the dustless lamp. With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi exercised the hand of web soundlessly, absorbing a thread of innate earth element energy from the innate dust parting stone into his body, quickly storing it in the earth meridians in his arms. After that, he placed his palm close to the innate awakening wood element energy, absorbing the thread of innate wood element energy and storing it in the wood meridians in his arms. After harvesting the earth and wood innate energies, Wu Qi felt his body was filled with a refreshing feeling. Upon entering his body, the 2 threads of innate earth element energy began to fuse with his corporeal body. The innate earth element energy made Wu Qi's corporeal strength stronger and stronger, and the innate wood element energy made his body more resilient, and the life force contained in his body more vigorous. In addition to that, the innate wood element could generate wind, and the wind and rain could turn into thunder, which made Wu Qi's agility and the explosive force of his muscles improve bit by bit. Finally, all that was left was the most powerful and rarest divine flame of order. With 70% caution, Wu Qi carefully extracted a thread of innate fire element energy from the divine flame of order and fused it into his fire meridians. After that, he clenched his jaws and took a deep breath, then unleashed his divine sense from his forehead, sucking the thumb-sized, 1 foot and 2-inch long purple-green divine flame into his spiritual ocean. A vast purple-green divine flame exploded crazily in Wu Qi's vast spiritual ocean, sending countless sparks in all directions. Suddenly, a huge wave emerged from the several thousand feet long pool of water in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, quickly wrapping around the rampaging divine flame and forcefully merging all the sparks back into one. Wu Qi's spiritual energy was being consumed at an incredible speed. He kept using his spiritual energy to form one profound rune after another in his spiritual ocean, cooperating with the water waves in his spiritual ocean to suppress the divine flame of order. All these runes came from the inheritance of Scroll of Stealing, and were specialized in restraining all yang and yin flames under the heaven, both tangible and intangible. It was the most ingenious divine art of controlling fire under the heaven. 108 crimson runes formed purely from his divine sense wrapped tightly around the divine flame of order in his spiritual ocean. Finally, Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Looking at the dustless lamp, which was still in perfect condition, apart from the 3 innate energies which were stolen by Wu Qi and the divine flame of order, Wu Qi hastily took out all kinds of materials he bought from Market of Four Seas during the daytime from his storage ring. Using the oil of the merman, which could last for 10,000 years, as the wick, and a few other materials as the auxiliary materials, a thread of purple-green flame once again burned in the dustless lamp. After that, he used the soul-breaking worm, the dust barrier, golden spider silk, and some other materials to construct a small restrictive formation on the dustless lamp. With that, Wu Qi had successfully completed the task of stealing the innate spirit items. Using these rare and precious items as the materials, he constructed a restrictive formation that could keep away the dust and calm the mind, which could unleash about 30% of the original dustless lamp's effect. As long as the oil of the merman did not dry up, no one would ever find out that the dustless lamp was not the original one. However, a single drop of the oil could burn for 100 years. Therefore, Wu Qi had added 200 grams of the oil into the dustless lamp, which would allow the lamp to burn for 10,000 years. Therefore, he did not have to worry that someone would find out that the dustless lamp was stolen in a short period of time. After giving a satisfied look at the restrictive formation he constructed, Wu Qi stealthily transformed into a wisp of cloud and flew out of Mount White Sunday. If you hadn't stopped him yesterday, Princess Xianglu would have hacked him to pieces. After stretching his body, Wu Qi sent his soul sense into the storage ring. Looking at the various top-grade spirit stones piled up like a mountain inside, Wu Qi said indifferently, "It's okay, it's okay. Princess Zhongli's face is disgusting and soft. She said she wanted to kill someone, but she couldn't do it. She also knows that Xiongqing and his brothers are a bunch of brainless idiots. Why would she care about them?" The storage ring was filled with top-grade spirit stones of the 5 elements: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Some of these spirit stones came from the spirit stone mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, some were gifts from the 130 cities of Huaiyang, Wu Qi's current fief, and some were secretly given to Wu Qi by Princess Xianglu this month. She knew that Wu Qi was practicing the qi circulating technique of 5 elements of heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. Fearing that Wu Qi's progress would be slow, she hurriedly gave a lot of spirit stones of the 5 elements to Wu Qi. A beauty's kindness is the hardest to bear. Wu Qi looked at the various spirit stones in the ring, feeling a bit happy but distressed. He made up his mind that if Xiongqing talked nonsense after drinking again, saying that he wanted Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu to get on the bed and have babies, he would definitely find an iron rod himself and let Xiongqing know what pain in the ass was. "You could have said this to me in private. Why did you talk nonsense in front of Princess Xianglu? She's a young girl. You, a boorish bear spirit, are asking for trouble." Thinking of Xiongqing and his brothers, who were struck by a series of thunderbolts last night, Wu Qi could only shake his head. Lu Qingfeng also stretched his back. Looking at a flock of birds flying high in the sky, he said with a smile, "That's true. Princess Zhanglu clearly knows what kind of people Xiongqing and his brothers are, so she won't really do anything to them. Xiongqing and his brothers, after all, are imperial high officials personally conferred by His Majesty. Aren't they afraid that Princess Zhanglu will really order them to be beheaded? They don't care if they suffer some physical pain." While the two of them were discussing how Xiongqing's words last night had caused Princess Zhanglu to fly into a rage, the sounds of Xiongqing and his brothers doing their morning exercises could be heard coming from the backyard below. 12 mutated violent bears, ranging from 20 to 30 feet in height, with bodies covered in scales and black fur, had reverted to their original forms. They were grinding their teeth and rubbing their palms together as they pounced on each other in the backyard. The beautiful backyard had been smashed into pieces, and the ground was shaking faintly as if there was an earthquake. Xiongqing and his brothers were doing their morning exercises as if they were fighting their mortal enemies. They exerted all their strength in every move they made, which made Wu Qi's eyes twitch. A loud boom rang out, as Xiongqing's youngest brother, Xiong Bubao, was sent flying nearly 1,000 feet away by a bare paw from his 3 elder brothers. He immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood. Lu Qingfeng shuddered when he saw this. Unconsciously, he leaped off the roof and spun away. These boorish fellows were addicted to fighting again. Once they went mad, they would attack with all their strength, regardless of who they were. Lu Qingfeng, who had nearly been killed by them a few times, no longer dared to stay near them. Looking at Xiong Bubao's miserable state, Wu Qi shuddered and hastily spun and fled. While chasing after Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi shouted, "Today, Zhuoguozheng Mansion will have to make a decision regarding the fight between the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom for the gold mine in the upper reaches of Tsanglang River. Should the gold mine be divided between the Gaoling Kingdom or the Lishan Kingdom, or should they share it equally? We need to come up with a solution as soon as possible. The 300,000 soldiers of both kingdoms have been facing each other across the river, and the war is about to break out." Lu Qingfeng halted his steps, his brows knitted into a tight frown. While walking side by side, both men were discussing how to handle this matter. As the Zhuoguozheng of Great Yan Dynasty, he was responsible for supervising and mediating all kinds of state affairs for the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yan Dynasty. When two kingdoms were fighting over various mineral resources, they would need to be mediated by the Prime Minister's office of the suzerain kingdom. However, such disputes usually involve great benefits, and the parties involved were not two individuals, but two vassal kingdoms with formidable national forces. If the dispute was not handled properly, it would bring about a great trouble. While discussing along the way, Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were having a headache. The case of two kingdoms fighting over the gold mine was submitted to them half a month ago. However, the information submitted was vague and unclear, and they couldn't even figure out which kingdom the forest in the upper reaches of Tsanglang River belonged to. With such a case, how could Lu Qingfeng make a judgment? After discussing for some time, when they were about to reach the main entrance of Duke Yan Li's mansion, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, spread his arms, sneered, and said, "Why don't we do it this way? Didn't both sides send out an army of 300,000 soldiers? Let the 300,000 soldiers start the war. With a time limit of 3 days, we'll divide the profit of the gold mine according to the number of soldiers who died in the war. This will be fair and reasonable." Upon hearing Wu Qi's extremely irresponsible words, Lu Qingfeng nearly fell to the ground. He glared angrily at Wu Qi from the corner of his eyes, scolded in a low voice, "Are you afraid that His Majesty won't find fault with me? This idea, I can't do it, I can never do it." Wu Qi shrugged and shook his head disapprovingly. Speaking of Yan Dan, Wu Qi found it strange as well. Over a month ago, Yan Dan and his company had indeed entered the process of breaking their gold core and forming their nascent soul. Over the past few days, Yan Dan had officially started attending the imperial court, but there was no news about him, Jing Ku, and his company forming their nascent souls. Could it be that they had purposely concealed this fact? Although Wu Qi had his doubts about this, he was not stupid enough to ask around about it. He just kept it in the bottom of his heart, quietly waiting to see what Yan Dan and his company were going to do next. When Princess Zhanglu formed her Jin Dan, there was a great celebration. But this time, when so many of them formed their nascent souls at the same time, nothing happened. It was really strange. With these questions in mind, Wu Qi walked out from the main entrance of Duke Yan Li's mansion, and happened to see a row of pitch-black coaches speeding towards Duke Yan Li's mansion on the main street in front of the mansion. Along the way, the coaches shouted at a few ministers who were about to rush to their own office, and came straight to the main entrance with an unbridled arrogance. Those ministers who were yelled at and forced to bring their guards to the side of the road seemed to have recognized the owner of the coaches. Their faces were filled with resentment, and they kept running far away from them. There were even a few ministers who kept throwing their glances over, pointing their fingers at Duke Yan Li's mansion and discussing something. Looking at the coaches, Wu Qi coughed lightly. Then, Zhang Hu and Hu Wei led a large group of guards and rushed down the stairs, stopping before the coaches. Luo Kadi and Ma Yang stood on the left and right side of Lu Qingfeng, shielding him. Luo Kadi cried out sternly, "Who are you? Stop the coaches at once. This is Duke Yan Li's mansion, no one is allowed to cause trouble here." The coaches behaved rudely. Although Zhang Hu and a few other guards were standing before the coaches, they still acted as if they couldn't rein in the reins and continued galloping several tens of feet forward, forcing Zhang Hu and his men to back off until they reached the stairs in front of the mansion. Four crocatas pulled by the black coach at the front came to the top of the stairs in front of Duke Yan Li's mansion, and only then did they stop slowly while snorting angrily. Wu Qi glared at them. A cold gleam flashed across his body, as he drew out the sword of Greedy Wolf and was about to swing it down. But Lu Qingfeng had already taken a few steps forward, staring at the coach that was about to rush up the stairs and cried out, "Don't you think you are being too arrogant and domineering? What are you trying to do by driving straight into my mansion?" The doors of those coaches suddenly opened, and a couple dozens of guards clad in black armor walked out in a single file. A crimson-red carpet rolled out from one of the coaches in the middle. An old man with a fat head and big ears, clad in a golden imperial robe and holding a silver walking stick in his hand, walked out slowly on the carpet. The old man raised his head and looked at Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. He coughed lightly, then shook his hand and threw a wooden box, about 1 foot in diameter, towards Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng moved his body and dodged the black wooden box. Wu Qi took a step forward, caught the wooden box, and opened it without hesitation. A white silk cloth was placed inside the wooden box, and on top of it was placed a human head, whose skin was red and pale, looking like a living person. Judging from the appearance of the human head, it was a young man in his 20s. He was handsome and valiant, and had the face of a pretty boy. However, when such a handsome face was placed in the wooden box, it gave off a strange aura. Wu Qi's face darkened. He stared at the fat old man and said angrily, "Sending a dead head so early in the morning? Are you trying to bring us bad luck?" The fat old man coughed again, gazed at Wu Qi from the corner of his eyes arrogantly, and said in an indifferent tone, "So, you are Marquis Tianyun." He, until now, no one in Ji City knows why His Majesty suddenly conferred the title of Marquis to a nobody like you. However, it is said that Marquis Tianyun has a peerless luck, and it seems that it is true. The fat old man sneered, then said in a deep voice, "This human head is the head of Taba Muxiang, the head of my nephew." With a strange expression, the fat old man gazed at Lu Qingfeng, then said, "Duke Yanlu, please tell that mad dog, Qin Qingshui, that I have nothing to do with the death of Duke Yanlu, Buji, and that he should never trouble me again." In order for Taba Muxiang to inherit the position left behind by Duke Yanlu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, was killed. If that Qin Qingshui dares to trouble me again, don't blame me for not letting him go. Taba Muxiang. Taba Qingye. Suddenly, Wu Qi knew who this old man was. Chapter 115. The Duke of Xian, Taba Ao, was the current monarch of Xian Kingdom. He was the biological father of Tuoba Haofeng and the dead Taba Qingye, the monarch of Xian Kingdom. He ruled over 38 provinces of Xian Kingdom, 943 magnificent cities, and an army of 1 million armored soldiers. Among the over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty, he could be ranked in the top 3. According to the secret files of Scouting Office of Great Yan Dynasty, when Taba Ao was still a child, a rebellion happened in the palace. His mother was poisoned to death, and when Taba Ao was just 2 months old, he was brought out of the palace by a loyal palace maid. The palace maid was hunted down and fell off a cliff, while Taba Ao was raised by a group of moon-howling divine mastiffs until he was 3 years old. Only then was he found by the previous Duke of Xian Kingdom. As he grew up in a group of mastiffs, Taba Ao had a rude and unreasonable nature. Among all the vassals of Great Yan Dynasty, he was the most unreasonable one, and had a murderous nature. Just look at his title. As the Duke of Xian had the name Ao in his name, the imperial clan of Xian Kingdom could do nothing to him. Although the Great Yan Dynasty had some complaints about this, there was nothing they could do to him. Early in the morning today, he brought a group of guards and stormed into Duke Yan Li's mansion, bringing the head of his own nephew to their doorstep. What a barbaric and cruel way of doing things. Wu Qi stared at Taba Ao, whose face was trembling with ferocity. His face turned unsightly. The head of Taba Muxiang in his hand seemed to have become heavy as well. Taba Ao gazed viciously at Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng, then said with a ferocious voice, Taba Muxiang is the illegitimate son of my sister and Yan Buji. My sister gave birth to a child out of wedlock, and if this news were to spread out, it would be bad for my reputation. Therefore, I raised him in the palace with the identity of a legitimate son. When Yan Buji drowned in the river, I admit that I coveted the title of Duke Yan Lo, and that's why I came up with a plan for Taba Muxiang. Am I wrong? Clenching his jaws tightly, he glared at Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng, who had an unsightly expression on their faces. Taba Ao grinned hideously and said, since Duke Qingfeng is able to inherit the title of Duke Yan Lo, could it be that your hands are completely clean, without any blood stains? Everyone was the same, so why did they have to hold on to this reason? For the sake of the title of Duke Yan Lu, my eldest son, Taba Qingye, has been killed by you, and now, I've presented you with the head of the culprit, Taba Muxiang. If anyone dares to pester me with this matter again, don't blame me for being rude to him. 2 streams of tears rolled down his cheeks as Taba Ao threw his head back and let out a long cry, Taba Qingye, Taba Muxiang, you 2 lowly bastards, you deserve to die. Stamping his feet on the ground, Taba Ao let out a loud shout of damn it for over 10 times, attracting the attention of all the ministers and princes who happened to be passing by. After that, he slammed his walking stick on the ground, turned around and entered the coach. A loud voice rang out, and the guards of Xian Gua entered the carriages one after another. The coachman scolded them, and the black carriages turned around and went back the way they came. Lu Qingfeng was so angry that his face turned blue. He scolded in a low voice, domineering, really unscrupulous. Even though he is the monarch of Xian Gua, and is so arrogant and domineering, has he forgotten that Xian Gua is also under my rule? His Xian Gua is also one of the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west. Then, he stomped his foot on the stairs, shattering a few feet wide stone brick into powder soundlessly. Lu Qingfeng gnashed his teeth and said, Taba Ao and I will never let go of the humiliation we suffered today. Xian Gua, Xian Gua. Does he think he has the right to present the head of Taba Muxiang to us? Weighing the head in his hand, Wu Qi casually handed it over to Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng was stunned, then he took over the head and held it close to his chest. He stared at Wu Qi and said in a low voice, sending a head here so early in the morning, could it be that Qin Qingshui has pushed him too hard? But, why did Qin Qingshui force him to do something? Do you still remember that night? It was obvious that Qin Qingshui was cooperating with Taba Qingye to set us up. Why is he finding trouble with Taba Ao now? Wu Qi pondered for a while, then he shook his head, frowned and said, Taba Ao said that Qin Qing Shui is a mad dog. Who can ever guess his thoughts? Young master, you can go ahead and discuss some important matters in Zhuo Guizheng's mansion. As for the conflict between the Gao Ling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom, just drag it out. Wu Qi has some thoughts here, and I'll explain them to young master in detail when I get back. Laughing coldly, Wu Qi nodded his head at Lu Qingfeng, spun and entered Duke Yan Li's mansion. He walked along the wall for a while, glanced to the left and right, then leaped over the wall nimbly, following the main street and chasing towards the direction where Taba Ao's convoy left. Standing in front of the Duke mansion, Lu Qingfeng held the head in his arms and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, he angrily threw the head over to Yan Fu, asking him to bury it properly. After that, he angrily boarded the coach, brought a large group of guards and headed straight towards the direction of Zhuo Guizheng's mansion. Following closely behind Lu Qingfeng, Yan Bugui subconsciously looked towards the direction where Taba Ao left, then turned to look at Wu Qi's back. Hastily, he gave a signal using a unique hand signal used by secret agents of Scouting Office. A few passers-by on the street who seemed to be passing by unintentionally turned around and left slowly. When they were over 1,000 feet away from Duke Yan Li's mansion, they suddenly sped up and plunged into an alley beside the street, chasing after Taba Ao's convoy. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, through countless large and small networks in Ji City, the news of Taba Ao paying a visit to Duke Yan Lu early in the morning and presenting the head of his nephew, Taba Muxiang, the half-brother of Duke Yan Lu Qingfeng, had been spread across the entire Ji City. Those influential nobles who knew Taba Ao's usual behavior just smiled when they heard the news. The wild temperament of Taba Ao, who was raised in a pack of mastiffs, had once again broken out. Taba Ao's convoy was running amok on the long street of Ji City, and countless innocent passers-by had been injured. They had nearly circled half a circle around the 6 inner cities of Ji City, passing through several dozens of streets and alleys, and finally came to a stop in a desolate and deserted alleyway. There were already 3 convoys waiting in the alleyway, each with a different appearance and painted with different colors. With a gloomy face, Taba Ao alighted from the coach, randomly picked one of the convoys and got on it. After that, he gave a light shout, and 4 convoys left the alleyway slowly, disappearing into the endless stream of people on the street. The convoy of convoys took a detour on the street for a while, and finally came straight to the clubhouse built by Xian Kingdom in Ji City. This was also the place where the hostages of Xian Kingdom usually stayed. Wu Qi wasn't fooled by Taba Ao's camouflage. He kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao's convoy, quietly following behind him as they circled around Ji City. Along the way, he discovered that wherever the convoy passed by, there were at least nearly 1,000 spies observing the movements of Taba Ao's convoy. Wu Qi saw with his own eyes that at least 18 secret agents and informers of Scouting Office were discovered by these informers who had been planted by Xian Kingdom in advance. They were entangled with them with all sorts of methods, causing them to lose control of Taba Ao. Fortunately, Wu Qi had an excellent tracking skill, and he also had an excellent hiding method. As a result, none of the spies of Xian Kingdom could discover his existence. Wu Qi kept his eyes fixed on Taba Ao, and followed him to a mansion located at the northwest corner of the inner second city, which was close to the palace city. The mansion was not big, but it was quiet and secluded. Not far away from it was the office of Great Yan's Scouting Office's Central Wind Guard. The street was densely packed with secret agents of Central Wind Guard and soldiers of Ji City's City Defense Army. Most of the people who came and went on this street were officials related to Scouting Office, and some vagabonds in the marketplace. There were all kinds of people, and it looked very complicated. The mansion occupied an area of approximately tens of acres, and the front and back of the mansion were planted with strange pines and cypresses. Ancient trees with trunks that looked like coiling dragons covered the entire mansion. From the outside of the mansion, one could only see the lush greenery that stretched like clouds, and there was no way one could see what was happening in the courtyard. On top of these towering trees, on average, there was a spy clad in a green cloak hiding in each of them. These vigilant spies had formed an impenetrable net, blocking off all possible directions for Wu Qi to sneak in. Yet, there was not a single blind spot for anyone to sneak into the courtyard. Hiding on top of a tall building a few courtyards away, Wu Qi twitched his lips and shook his head helplessly. The defense of this courtyard was indeed impenetrable. If it was Wu Qi 1 month ago, he would have no way to sneak into this place stealthily. But now... Laughing coldly, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture. Abruptly, his body transformed into a sheet of misty green light and shadow, and noiselessly leaped into the air and plunged into a huge tree in the courtyard. After obtaining the innate wood element aura and starting to cultivate the source of wood chapter, Wu Qi was able to exercise the innate wood element escape art. Using the huge trees in the courtyard as his cover, without alerting anyone, he easily sneaked into the courtyard, followed Taba Ao and came to a side courtyard. Underneath a few large pine trees, there was a rack of grapevines growing thickly. Clad in a black brocade robe and barefoot, Qin Shui was having his body massaged by 2 beautiful teenage girls. When he heard Taba Ao's footsteps, he lazily opened his eyes, greeted Taba Ao and said, "Duke Xian, how is it going? Now that I've delivered the head of Taba Muxiang to you, you have nothing to do with this matter anymore. Can you put your mind at ease now?" Taba Ao snorted coldly, strode next to Qin Shui and sat down on a couch. Fuming with rage, he clenched his fists and growled in a low voice, "When have I, Taba Ao, ever suffered such humiliation in my entire life? Qingye is dead, and in order to clear his name, he even killed Muxiang himself. Hao Feng has also been marked by His Majesty. In the future, he will inherit the throne of the Xian kingdom, and perhaps, he will face more troubles." Viciously cursing Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng's 18 generations of ancestors, Taba Ao said furiously, "Qin Shui, find a way to kill a few trusted subordinates of that kid, or else, I can't swallow this anger." Qin Shui laughed mockingly, threw a sideways glance at Taba Ao, and said, "You should be content with what you have. By sacrificing Taba Qingye and Taba Muxiang, you can easily extricate yourself from this matter." Using the weapons of the city defense army and the city defense mechanism to assassinate the descendants of the imperial clan, such a serious crime can be absolved with the death of a son and a nephew. What else do you want from such a cheap thing? Fiercely grabbing the chest of the girl standing next to him, Qin Shui said in a vexed tone, "I still have a big trouble waiting for me. His Majesty has asked me to find out who is the culprit behind this case." "But, who is the culprit? If I can't find a scapegoat, and am forced to live in seclusion, Duke Xian will become a deaf and blind man in Ji City." Taba Ao's face turned extremely gloomy. He rose to his feet, glared at Qin Shui, sneered, and said, "No matter what methods you use, you have to deal with this matter properly. I've already lost a son and a nephew. If you are forced to live in seclusion, you have to spit out everything that you've eaten and taken from me all these years. Do you think my gold, silver, jewelry, beautiful girls, and mansions are so easy to enjoy?" He gave Qin Shui a fierce glare, whose face had turned dark, then spun and said coldly, "Remember, this matter ends here. Muxiang didn't get the title of Duke Yanlu, so don't drag me into this matter. You, Qin Shui, have taken my money, but you didn't help me get the title of Duke Yanlu. I won't ask for the money back, but you have to clean up the mess." Then, Taba Ao strode out from the courtyard and warned with a deep voice, "I don't want His Majesty to know that this matter is related to me. I didn't send anyone to assassinate Yen Buji, and I also didn't send anyone to assassinate the current Duke Yanlu to help Taba Muxiang fight for the title of Duke. All these have nothing to do with me." Taba Ao left the mansion. Qin Shui remained silent for a long while, then suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Ying Chuan, come out now. I have something to tell you." Wu Qi, who was hiding in the crown of a huge tree, felt his heart skip a beat. Ying Chuan? Which Ying Chuan? Princess Ying Chuan of the Lu Kingdom. Chapter 116. A sweet moan was heard coming from a small and exquisite abode behind the grape trellis. A fragrant scent drifted in the air, as a naked, beautiful lady walked slowly out of the abode. She was clad in a pink veil. It looked like she had just taken a bath, as there were still crystal-clear water droplets on her long hair, and on her exposed chest, there were droplets of water slowly sliding down. From Wu Qi's angle, he couldn't see the lady's face clearly. He could only see her slender waist twisting and turning like a water snake as she came next to Qin Qingshui. Then, she plopped herself down on Qin Qingshui's chest and intimately hugged Qin Qingshui's neck. Then, she gave Qin Qingshui a heavy kiss on his face, then called out intimately, "Grand Marquis Qin, is that fat pig just now the Duke of Xian?" Qin Qingshui pulled off the veil from the lady's body, grabbed and pinched her body with both hands and said, "Cut the nonsense. Among the hanger-ons of Duke of Yen, are Luo Kadi and Mao Yang your former subordinates? Is there any way to control them? If there is, frame Duke Yen Lu, push the blame of Yen Buji's murder onto him and his mother's clan. With that, you can solve my current predicament, and you can avoid the disaster of the Lu Kingdom's downfall." Upon hearing Qin Qingshui's words, Wu Qi immediately understood the identity of this beautiful lady. She was indeed Princess Yingchuan of the Lu Kingdom, the birth mother of Marquis Lu Suifeng, and the former mistress of Luo Kadi and Mao Yang. What was strange was that the Lu Kingdom was very far away from Ji City, and it had only been a little over a month since Lu Qingfeng inherited the title of Duke of Yen. So, how could she arrive at Ji City in such a timely manner? Princess Yingchuan breathed out a sigh, grumbled bitterly and viciously, "Those two scoundrels who betrayed their master, what can we expect from them? Now that Lu Qingfeng has inherited the title of Duke Yen Lu, he has a group of followers from the imperial clan, and he holds great power in his hands. How can Yingchuan still control them? I think they have long forgotten the look of their mistress." She twisted her body a few times on Qin Qingshui's body, then said with a sweet voice, "Marquis Di Qinghui, Grand Marquis, you are the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard. Can't you fabricate some evidence and push the crime of Yen Buji's murder onto Lu Qingfeng? As long as we can ascertain that it was that bitch, Tai Yuewu, who was the mastermind behind the assassination of Yen Buji, the scouting office will confiscate the entire Tai clan and kill all the people involved." Princess breathed out a sigh. Princess opened her lips and slowly, "Princess. Princess Princess. And Princess Qin. And Princess. From Qin, Yen. And Ling King from the palace, Princess, from the sea, Qin. From Qin, Yu Ling." While gently kissing Qin Qingshui's body, Princess Yingchuan said with a soft voice, "Before Tai Yuewu returned to the Lu Kingdom, Tai clan had become extremely arrogant. Currently, that old fogey, Marquis Yuanyang, is reorganizing his army and preparing for a rebellion. Lord Marquis, the Lu Kingdom gives Lord Marquis so much every year. Lord Marquis must not let the Tai clan take over the Lu Kingdom's foundation." All of a sudden, Princess Yingchuan kissed Qin Qingshui's vital part. Qin Qingshui's shriveled donkey-like face suddenly turned snow-white. The blood on his face had long been sucked away. His skinny body tensed up as he gritted his teeth and growled in a low voice, "Do you think I don't know? But how am I supposed to frame him? The Lu Kingdom was just a third-rate kingdom among all the vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty. How could a mere Tai clan have the power to assassinate Yen Buji? Is Yen Buji really that easy to kill? Not only him, but the other former supervisor, rear supervisor, and right supervisor have all been killed 100 times over." Panting heavily, Qin Qingshui held Princess Yingchuan's head in his arms, clenched his jaws and said, "The lords of the four great kingdoms are in charge of the supervision of over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yen Dynasty. They hold a high position and hold great power. Countless monarchs of vassal kingdoms have their eyes on them. Not to mention a mere Marquis Yuanyang from your Lu Kingdom, even if Duke of Xian wanted to assassinate Yen Buji, it would not be so easy. The water in this matter is very deep." Wu Qi looked at Qin Qingshui's little body tensed up. He straightened all 10 fingers, then slowly bent them one by one. When Wu Qi bent the last finger, about the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Qin Qingshui's body suddenly trembled, and his snow-white donkey-like face suddenly turned purplish-red. Suddenly, hot sweat broke out from his body. Panting heavily, he held Princess Ying Chuan's head tightly in his arms. His body was trembling unconsciously, and only after a long while did he let out a moan that sounded like a dying man, and slowly relaxed his body. Princess Ying Chuan raised her head up with a charming smile on her face, and just happened to let Wu Qi see half of her face. She was indeed an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Although she had already raised Lu Suifeng, who was a grown-up son, Princess Ying Chuan still looked young like a 16-year-old beauty, and her beautiful face was very attractive. Especially her identity as the daughter of the Lu Kingdom's monarch, it could make one's imagination run wild. Lovingly, Qin Qingshui stroked Princess Ying Chuan's face and said with a low voice, "It's not going to work if you want to put the blame on them. We need to find a suitable person to do it. His Majesty has already paid attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination. If I dare to act recklessly in this case and don't come up with some solid and credible evidence, I won't even know how I died one day." Princess Ying Chuan's beautiful brows knitted into a tight frown. With a piteous expression, she looked at Qin Qingshui, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Marquis, you're the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office, a person who holds great power in his hand. Can't you find a way to frame someone else? If we don't get rid of that bitch, Tai Yuewu, and the Tai clan behind her, Ying Chuan will have no home to return to in the future. If the Lu Kingdom really changes its surname to Tai, what should we do if Marquis changes his name to Ying Chuan?" Intentionally or unintentionally, a stream of crystal-clear liquid flowed down from the corner of Princess Ying Chuan's mouth. It was unknown what kind of seductive technique she had used, but even Wu Qi, who was lying on top of the tree, could feel his heart skip a beat, and a scorching heat was bursting out from his lower abdomen. Since he had stolen the enormous kidney energies from both of Qin Shuwen's kidneys, the strength of Wu Qi's kidneys had become very strong. As soon as the flame in his heart was ignited, his lower body immediately stood erect like iron, causing Wu Qi, who was lying on top of the tree, to feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, the divine flame of order in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean was extremely magical. As soon as the evil flame was ignited, it immediately emitted a greenish-purple light and shone upon Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Waves of scorching heat flowed from his spiritual ocean to his entire body, and in just a blink of an eye, it circled 3 times around Wu Qi's body. The flame in his heart that was ignited by Princess Ying Chuan's unknown seductive technique was instantly extinguished, and Wu Qi's body quickly returned to normal. Beads of cold sweat broke out on Wu Qi's forehead. The seductive technique of Princess Ying Chuan was indeed incredible. While he was praising Princess Ying Chuan's seductive technique, a couple of men, clad in green cloaks, suddenly fell down from the branches of a dozen ancient pine trees in the courtyard. Each of these men was staring at Princess Ying Chuan with an infatuated look. Some of them even had their faces blushed, howling and leaping towards Princess Ying Chuan. Princess Ying Chuan let out a soft cry, as her petite body suddenly curled up into a ball and shrunk into Qin Qingshui's arms. Qin Qingshui flew into a rage. He snapped sternly, "A bunch of useless fools. What's the use of me keeping you here? Do you think I want you to make a fool of yourselves here? Drag them out and punish them with 300 sticks. Drag them out and punish them with 300, no, 500 sticks." A group of beast warriors of Scouting Office rushed into the courtyard like a pack of wolves and tigers. They grabbed these spies who fell down from the trees and dragged them out of the courtyard. Very soon, muffled noises of heavy sticks hitting on flesh could be heard coming from outside the courtyard. Those spies who fell down from the trees because of the seductive technique let out miserable cries. But very soon, their cries disappeared without a trace. In just a few words, dozens of spies had been beaten to death. Lying in Qin Qingshui's arms, Princess Ying Chuan kept praising Qin Qingshui's manly spirit and heroic character with a sweet voice. Meanwhile, Wu Qi kept shaking his head while lying on top of a tree. Under such an order, how did Qin Qingshui, the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, manage to hold his position so firmly? If not for the fact that he was the lineal descendant of Qin Wuyang, perhaps he would have long been kicked out of his position, and his life might even be in danger. No matter how Qin Qingshui managed his subordinates, after listening to the secret discussion between him, Princess Yingchuan, and Taba Ao, Wu Qi could roughly guess the role Qin Qingshui was playing in this matter. Taba Ao was bent on fighting for the title of Duke Yanlu, but Lu Qingfeng was the first one who came to Ji City. Therefore, Taba Ao came to Qin Qingshui, asking him to help him kill Lu Qingfeng, so that Taba Muxiang could be promoted to the position of Duke Yanlu. That was the reason why Taba Qingye lured and killed Lu Qingfeng, and Qin Qingshui chose to help Taba Qingye by arresting Lu Qingfeng on the spot. After Lu Qingfeng had successfully inherited the title of Duke, Yan Dan began to pay attention to the case of Yan Buji's murder. In order to clear his name, Taba Ao hastily killed Taba Muxiang as a sign to Lu Qingfeng. At the same time, without any sense of loyalty, he asked Qin Qingshui to clean up all the loose ends himself. At the same time, Princess Yingchuan came to Qin Qingshui. Supposedly, both of them were old lovers. As Lu Qingfeng had inherited the title of Zhuoguozheng and Duke Yanlu, Tai Yuewu's mother's family had begun to sharpen their blades in the Lu Kingdom, planning to strike the monarch of the Lu Kingdom. In order to save herself, Princess Yingchuan had to deal with Lu Qingfeng. But, with her identity as the daughter of the monarch of a third-tier vassal kingdom, how could she deal with Lu Qingfeng, the Duke of Yanlu? Helpless, Princess Yingchuan could only beg Qin Qingshui to frame Lu Qingfeng. However, with Yan Dan personally paying attention to the case of Yan Buji's assassination, even if Qin Qingshui had 100 guts, he would not dare to frame someone recklessly. Princess Yingchuan kept acting coquettishly in Qin Qingshui's arms, begging and using all kinds of flirtatious methods, hoping that Qin Qingshui would agree to help her deal with Lu Qingfeng. Even if she could not kill him, she could at least get Lu Qingfeng to promise her that Tai clan would not go too far in the Lu Kingdom. After acting coquettishly for a while, Princess Yingchuan finally told him her bottom-line condition: if Tai clan could behave themselves and not try to usurp the monarch's position, the monarch of the Lu Kingdom would even be willing to cede half of the kingdom to Tai clan, allowing them to establish their own kingdom. Qin Qingshui just gave Princess Yingchuan a vague answer with the name of Yan Dan. For the whole morning, both of them had made love on the bed for a few times, naked. Qin Qingshui had taken all the advantage, and Princess Yingchuan had tried her best, yet she still couldn't win a single promise from Qin Qingshui. Qin Qingshui had vented his desire on Princess Yingchuan for a total of 7 to 8 times, and at last, he did not even have the strength to lift his finger. Only then did he put his arms around Princess Yingchuan, laughed and gave her an idea: all right, I'm being watched by His Majesty. Scouting office can't cover the sky with one hand in Great Yan Dynasty, as Gao Jianli, the Prime Minister, still has a secret spy office that has the right to supervise scouting office. Qin Qingshui breathed out a sigh, kissed Princess Yingchuan's cheek, and said with a low voice, with the swallow keeping an eye on him: I can't simply frame Lu Qingfeng and convict him. If you want to protect the Lu Kingdom, just do as I say. First, go find the patriarch of Imperial Clan, Duke Yanqing, Yu Xian, and then. Qin Qingshui moved his mouth close to Princess Yingchuan's ear, using the technique of divine sense, and gave her a secret instruction. Princess Yingchuan's body turned stiff, and her face turned extremely unsightly. However, Qin Qingshui didn't bother to consider what Princess Yingchuan was thinking. After taking a few more liberties with her, he put on his clothes with the help of 2 young girls, then left without paying any attention to Princess Yingchuan. All the spies in the mansion followed him out of the courtyard. Even the corpses of the dozen or so spies who had been killed were cleaned up. Princess Yingchuan lay on the bed and stared blankly for a while. Suddenly, she let out an evil laugh and began cursing under her breath. Qin Qingshui, Yingchuan is going to wipe out your entire clan. Chapter 117. The coach of Princess Ing Chuan left the courtyard. After all, she was the princess of the Lu kingdom. Naturally, she could not be compared with the monarch of a great kingdom like Taba Ao. Princess Ing Chuan's coach was kept in a very low profile. It was just an ordinary double-wheeled coach, painted with a lacquer. 4 guards were stationed beside the coach, and apart from Princess Ing Chuan, there were only 2 serving ladies in the coach. A coach like this looked rather shabby in Ji City, extremely inconspicuous. After leaving the mansion, the coach took a few rounds around the inner second city of Ji City. After passing through a few streets and alleys, the coach went through the main road and exited the city gate. It took another round around the 3 inner cities, and finally came to the inner first city through a city gate on the east. Along the way, Wu Qi, who had been following behind the coach, could not help but shake his head. Compared to Taba Ao, Princess Ing Chuan's experience was far behind. In order to get rid of the spies, she had purposely taken so many detours along the way, and tried her best to travel along those deserted streets. However, when such a shabby coach was roaming around in the inner city, it would actually attract more attention. Wu Qi did not pay much attention to the chariots, but when Princess Ing Chuan's chariot went straight into the inner city, which was the inner city that was right next to the imperial city, Wu Qi was taken aback by what he saw. Those who lived in the inner city were the core members of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan, such as the 8 princes, or the members of imperial clan who had a higher seniority than the 8 princes. Could it be that Princess Ing Chuan had some kind of relationship with these core members of imperial clan? The coach traveled along the Green Swallow Avenue in the inner city for a few miles from east to west, then turned into a side street called Green Cloud Alley. Princess Ing Chuan's coach came to a halt. It was extremely difficult to follow Princess Ing Chuan in the inner city. Not to mention the city guards along the way, there were dozens of sky patrolling eagle guards flying in the sky, constantly monitoring any movement on the ground. Many personal guards of imperial clan in the inner city were also coming and going from time to time. Even if there was an unfamiliar person on the street, it would be questioned by these people. Eventually, Wu Qi was forced to exercise the escape art of earth and follow behind Princess Ing Chuan's coach. He also noticed that there was a small shield emblem on Princess Ing Chuan's coach. The city guards along the way also saw this emblem, so they didn't stop her carriage. Otherwise, with her shabby carriage, how could she enter the inner city? The place where Princess Ing Chuan's coach stopped was the side entrance of a mansion. It was at least 1.5 miles away from the south side entrance. The area of this mansion was extremely large, much larger than Yu Xian's mansion. Wu Qi hid underground. His divine sense penetrated the ground and swept a glance at a vertical board on the left side of the side door. The vertical board was only about a foot long and had 3 small golden characters engraved on it, Prince Ren's mansion. The Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, was one of the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty. Like Yan Halua, he was also Yan Dan's great-grandson. However, Yan Xianchen was much older than Yan Halua. He was the most experienced one among the 8 princes of Great Yan Dynasty. He had been sitting on the throne of Prince Ren for 500 years, and his cultivation base had reached the realm of Jin Dan. He was the prince with the highest prestige among all the 8 princes. Although Imperial Grandmaster Yan Yuxian was 1 generation younger than Yan Dan's grandson, when it came to age, the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, was the oldest among all the 8 princes. He had been working in Great Yan Dynasty for several hundred years. Apart from the Crown Prince, Yan Qijuan, who had always surpassed him, Yan Qijuan was basically the man with the greatest power in Great Yan Imperial Court, apart from Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan. Only when the other few princes of Great Yan Dynasty joined forces could they contend against Yan Xianchen. Among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers of Great Yan Dynasty, apart from the Prime Minister Gao Jianli, who served Yan Dan for a long time, the other 2 prime ministers, the Minister of Justice, and a few other important ministers of Great Yan Dynasty were all disciples of Yan Xianchen. After several hundred years of entanglement of interests, the power held by Yan Xianchen, the Prince of Ren, was simply beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Wu Qi unleashed his divine sense and scanned the 3 gold-plated characters of Prince Ren's mansion in a daze. He was right, this was Prince Ren's mansion. Princess Yingchuan and Yan Xianchen were friends? Or was she just in contact with someone in his mansion? Wu Qi had no idea what Qin Qingshui had told Princess Yingchuan, asking her to look for the Duke of Yanxing, Yu Xian. But to his surprise, she went straight for the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen. This gave Wu Qi a great shock. Since the person she was looking for was Yan Xianchen, why was she taking a stroll in the inner city just now? Was she playing a trick on him? The curtain of the coach fluttered, and Princess Yingchuan came out from it. She held her head high up, and with the help of 2 serving ladies, she walked straight into the side door of Prince Ren's mansion. An imperial eunuch clad in a red robe was already waiting in front of the door, together with a few young eunuchs who looked no older than 10 years old. Upon seeing Princess Yingchuan, this imperial eunuch, who obviously had a rather high status in Prince Ren's mansion, hastily bowed and greeted her with a smile on his face. Was there any commotion just now? Princess Yingchuan held her head high up and asked with an indifferent tone. A few ignorant men were following behind Princess, and now they have been used to fill up the moat. The imperial eunuch hastily replied, 5 of them are secret agents of Xian Kingdom, and 7 of them are from scouting office. Now, they have all sunk into the moat, and they won't give you any more troubles. Rest assured, Princess, except for those who should know about this, those who shouldn't know about this will never know that you're here. Princess Yingchuan nodded her head, smiled sweetly, stretched out her finger and gently pinched the chin of the imperial eunuch, then walked into the side door with a smile on her face. While Wu Qi was about to follow Princess Yingchuan into Prince Ren's mansion, he was surprised to find that the imperial eunuch, who should have gotten rid of the root of troubles and had no feelings for women, was swallowing a few mouthfuls of saliva, staring greedily at Princess Yingchuan's swaying buttocks. With a strange smile on his face, he followed behind Princess Yingchuan. How could this be an imperial eunuch? Clearly, he was a burly man with a strong desire. Strange. Strange. Wu Qi murmured under his breath, then hastily plunged into Prince Ren's mansion. As the most experienced prince of Great Yan dynasty, the mansion of Prince Ren, Yan Xianchen, was heavily guarded. Both the ground and the sky were protected by layers upon layers of defensive mechanisms. Wu Qi continued his journey underground. About 1,000 feet below the ground of Prince Ren's mansion, a defensive formation of 9 palaces grade, was tightly wrapped up. On top of that, it was obvious that there was a master of formation guarding these formations. Streams of powerful ripples of energy were constantly circulating underground, constantly monitoring the activity underground. However, in Wu Qi's opinion, the 3-layered 9 palaces defensive formation was a little too simple and crude. Although the master of formation who constructed these formations had the cultivation base of the later stage of Jin Dan realm, the master of formation guarding here should only have the cultivation base of the early stage of Jin Dan realm. Therefore, the formations could only unleash less than 30% of their full power, and there were quite a lot of flaws in the circulation of their energy. Wu Qi had only extracted a great amount of earth element energies from the surrounding underground and wrapped them around his body. With that, he could easily penetrate through these 3 defensive formations. He even had the leisure to send his divine sense through the formations, peeping at the master of formation who was controlling these 3 formations. He was a human immortal of Jin Dan realm who was guarding on top of a tall tower located in the heart of Prince Ren's mansion. The 9-storied tall tower was connected to a total of 9 defensive formations in Prince Ren's mansion. It was the core of the defensive mechanisms of Prince Ren's mansion. The dark-skinned human immortal was sitting on the lowest floor of the tall tower, performing incantation gestures with a serious expression, controlling the operation of the 9 formations. However, because of his cultivation base and the cultivation of the formations, he didn't notice that Wu Qi had already entered Prince Ren's mansion. Sneering, Wu Qi followed closely behind Princess Yingchuan and came to the back garden of Prince Ren's mansion. The back garden of Prince Ren's mansion was at least 3 times bigger than Lu Qingfeng's back garden. The garden was filled with luxuriant trees, and numerous abodes were hidden amidst the grasses and flowers. It was a very secretive place. With great familiarity, Princess Ying Chuan walked along a path paved with golden shells, and finally came to a abode surrounded by a stream. The abode was built entirely with pink, translucent strange stones, which made it look exquisite and luxurious, yet gave off a charming aura. Carefully, Wu Qi squeezed his way into the abode, and came out from an artificial hill that was filled with holes of various sizes. Coincidentally, there was a cave in the artificial hill that could fit Wu Qi, and it was densely filled with countless fist-sized holes. Through these holes, Wu Qi could see everything that happened in the abode. Peering through one of the holes, Wu Qi couldn't help but gasp. Right in front of the abode was a courtyard paved with palm-sized red jade blocks. A naked man, who stood over 8 feet tall, his skin as white as snow, his body strong and muscular, and his face handsome but filled with an evil aura, was wearing a special wheel made of pure gold, about 3 feet in diameter, on his lower body. Complacently, he was turning the wheel at high speed with both hands. The man's body stood straight up, and without even asking, one could tell that the wheel made of pure gold was extremely heavy. The wheel was spinning at a very fast speed, producing swooshing noises from time to time. Sparks kept bursting out from the friction between his body and the wheel. However, his body was not harmed at all. Instead, the wheel made of pure gold had some scratches left on it. A group of beautiful girls, whose every movement was filled with an enchanting aura, had surrounded the courtyard. Their eyes were fixed on the man's erect lower body, clapping their hands and shouting, "Sect leader, you are so awesome. Sect leader is getting more and more powerful." Wu Qi's teeth were chattering when he saw this. Subconsciously, he touched his private parts, grinned and shook his head. Using a wheel made of pure gold to wrap around that treasure and spin it at such a high speed? How could this be described as powerful? This was simply an extraordinary talent, a freak among freaks. All of a sudden, the historical records of someone from Lu Xiaobai's memory rushed into Wu Qi's mind. Shi Huang grew strong, and the Empress Dowager continued to be lascivious. Lu Bui feared that he would be implicated, so he asked the man of the great Yin, Lao Ai, to be his lover. Sometimes, he played music and asked Lao Ai to travel on the Tong wheel of the Yin Pass. When the Empress Dowager heard about it, she used it to trick her. When the Empress Dowager heard about it, she wanted to get it for herself. Lu Bui entered Lao Ai and swindled people to accuse him of corruption. In history, apart from the famous fake eunuch Lao Ai, who else could accomplish such a feat? Lao Ai must be him. When he was still a mortal, he could already play with a wheel made of paulownia wood. Now, his cultivation base should be at the same level as Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and the others. Naturally, his innate ability was even more powerful. The wheel made of paulownia wood was not heavy enough, so it was only right that he used a wheel made of pure gold to show off his ability. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and carefully looked at Lao Ai from top to bottom with the corner of his eye. For some unknown reason, when he saw this fellow, Wu Qi felt like he was looking at a cobra that was spitting venom. Instinctively, he felt threatened. At this moment, Princess Ying Chuan came into the courtyard. Upon entering, she dropped to her knees and bowed to Lao Ai with a smile on her face. "Your servant, Ying Chuan, offers greetings to the sect leader of Great Sun, old immortal Lao Ai." Princess Ying Chuan's voice was soft and languid, filled with a seductive charm. Chapter 118. Right when Princess Ying Chuan stepped into the courtyard, Lao Ai, who had a muscular body like that of a fiend, immediately removed the golden wheel from his lower body while laughing out loud, then grabbed Princess Ying Chuan and brought her to his side. Very quickly, Lao Ai took off Princess Ying Chuan's clothes, then held the petite and beautiful Princess Ying Chuan in his arms as if he was carrying a baby. With a jerk of his body, he plunged deep into Princess Ying Chuan's body. "Ying Chuan, you little bitch. I haven't seen you for a few years, but your cultivation base has improved greatly. In about 15 minutes, Lao Ai had completely absorbed the enormous energy essence from Princess Ing Chuan's body. After purifying and refining all of them, he gave 1% of them to Princess Ing Chuan, while the rest of them were transformed into energies and turned into his own cultivation base. However, after Princess Ing Chuan absorbed this 1% of energies, her cultivation base had actually improved from the respiration tier of Xiantian realm to the body-strengthening tier. Princess Ing Chuan pressed her body tightly against Lao Ai's chest, giggled softly and said, "Sect Master, old immortal, it has been 5 years since Ing Chuan last saw you. During the past 5 years, Ing Chuan has enjoyed himself with 43 Xiantian warriors, and 1,759 peak stage Ho Tian warriors. Hehe, the cultivation technique taught by old immortal is really incredible. Ing Chuan has plucked the innate yang energy from those people, and they still have no idea about it." A strange, four-colored gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He could clearly see a heterogeneous yet powerful energy essence bursting out from Princess Ing Chuan's lower abdomen, flowing into his body through Lao Ai's penis. Lao Ai's long hair stood up one after another, with countless wisps of white mist rising up from them. His muscles began to swell, turning from a streamlined and smooth muscles into sharp and angular muscles that looked like they were cut by an axe. "Yes," said Princess Ing Chuan in a deep voice. "Qin Qingshui wants Ing Chuan to find the Duke of Yanxing, Yu Xian, and Su Zuo Guizheng, Duke of Yanlu, for being a traitor and unfilial. His father was assassinated, and instead of avenging his father, he had colluded with his mother's clan to seize the foundation of Great Yan Dynasty." After pondering for a brief moment, Lao Ai waved his hand and drove away the few beautiful girls. He sat down on the jade bed, smiled at Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Fortunately, you came to find me. If not, Yan Qingfeng would be in great trouble, and you, Ing Chuan, would be dead for sure. Hey, Qin Qingshui, this descendant of Qin Wuyang is quite ruthless. It's a pity that he's still young and anxious when something happens. How could he do such a thing?" Laughing coldly, Lao Ai closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Suddenly, he waved his hand at Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Come, I'll tell you something. Later on, you'll go find Yan Qingfeng and make a deal with him. Ask your father to give the Tai clan a few prefectures in the Lu kingdom and let them form their own kingdom. They are not allowed to have any designs on your family. The condition is..." Lao Ai sneered and said, "Ever since Yu Xian became the imperial grandmaster of Great Yan Dynasty, I've been keeping my eyes and ears around him. Over the years, he had gotten to know him quite well. This fellow is greedy, lustful, and pretentious. But there is one good thing about him. When he accepts someone's money, he will definitely help them get things done. Yan Qingfeng bribed him with a county, asking him to help him with the matter of inheriting the title of Duke Yanlu. Yu Xian is a man who never hesitates when he accepts money. Now that he has accepted a county, the title of Duke will be secured for Yan Qingfeng. Judging from Lao Ai's performance, he should have formed his nascent soul. However, until now, he still hadn't discovered that Wu Qi had sneaked into his courtyard. Clearly, his cultivation base in soul and nascent divinity was just ordinary. No matter how powerful his energy was, no matter how strong his nascent soul was, a cultivator with a weak nascent divinity would eventually be like a pillar in the wall, and his achievement would always be limited. Wu Qi felt his scalp go numb. No wonder Lady Ruyang cursed Princess Ing Chuan as a slut who could sleep with any man. In just a short span of 5 years, 43 Xiantian experts and 1,759 peak stage Ho Tian experts had become Princess Ing Chuan's personal guests. The frequency of this was really astonishing. No wonder the tiny bit of energy Lao Ai fed back to her after he purified it was able to raise her cultivation base by 2 realms. Lao Ai enjoyed the remaining enormous amount of energy all by himself. Perhaps, this energy was equal to at least 100 years of laborious cultivation of a Jin Dan realm cultivator. In just a few seconds, Princess Yingchuan's fair and tender skin had turned pink, and pinkish sweat kept dripping down from her body, forming a small puddle on the ground. Both of her hands were gripping tightly onto Lao Ai's arms, while her nails were desperately scratching on Lao Ai's skin. But Lao Ai's smooth skin was 100 times stronger and more flexible than raw cowhide. Princess Yingchuan's long and scarlet nails had broken a few of them on his skin, but not even a scratch was left on his skin. Inside the artificial hill, Wu Qi, who had curled up into a meatball, had his eyes filled with a myriad of colors. What he saw made his divine soul tremble, and he had no idea where he was. Upon hearing what Princess Yingchuan said, Wu Qi smacked his lips. There were supreme-grade energy stones in the national treasury of the Lu Kingdom. And Great Yan Dynasty even built a minor universal teleportation formation in the Lu Kingdom. It was a blunder indeed. If he had known this earlier, he would have paid a visit to the Lu Kingdom's royal palace before he left the Lu Kingdom. Perhaps, what Yan Dan, Jing Ke, and all the other men had attained through over 2,000 years of laborious cultivation could not be compared to Lao Ai, this peerless evil man. However, the cultivation base obtained from this evil cultivation technique was, after all, not a stable foundation. Wu Qi thought to himself, no matter how strong Lao Ai's cultivation base was, there was no need for him to be afraid of him. All the cultivators who cultivated to Jin Dan realm and nascent soul realm by plucking cultivation techniques were just like castles on the beach. Their foundation was too weak, and they were not worth paying too much attention to. Princess Yingchuan's face turned extremely unsightly. The title of Duke Yanlu has become vacant once again. No matter who was the one who assassinated Yan Buji, and no matter who was the one behind all these, there will always be some clues. He has set up an inescapable net in advance, and once the mastermind makes a move, he will be able to capture the mastermind in one fell swoop. He has made a great contribution, but Yingchuan was assassinated by him, and Yan Qingfeng was unlucky enough to be removed from the title of Duke Yanlu of Zhuoguozheng. Forcing a few tears out of her eyes, Princess Yingchuan said with a sweet voice, "Old immortal, Yingchuan, have emptied all the supreme-grade energy stones in the Lu Kingdom's national treasury, activated the minor universal teleportation formation that Great Yan Dynasty had constructed in the Lu Kingdom, and came to Ji City in a hurry." Princess Yingchuan knelt on the ground, holding Lao Ai's thigh with both hands, and gently rubbing her chin against the sensitive part of Lao Ai's thigh. She looked at Lao Ai with a pitiful expression and said with a sweet voice, "Old immortal, it's not that Yingchuan doesn't want to listen to you, but if I didn't come here to ask for help, I'm afraid I would be homeless in the future." Not allowing Princess Yingchuan to say anything, Lao Ai said with a cold voice, "If you report this to Chief Yu Xian, you will be dead for sure." Lao Ai looked at Princess Yingchuan lazily and said in an indifferent tone, "What am I doing? I need to protect myself." Yan Dan scolded him during the palace banquet, and gave him 3 months to investigate the case of Yan Buji's assassination. How is he going to investigate this case? He has no clue at all, so how is he going to investigate this case? He used you to oust Yan Qingfeng from the position of Duke Yanlu. Doesn't that mean the position of Duke Yanlu is vacant? Lao Ai let out a strange laugh, shook his head and said, "If you report this to Yan Qingfeng, Yu Xian will only ask someone to drive you out of the imperial family palace with a big stick, and he will never listen to your nonsense. However, once you step out from the imperial family palace, Qin Shui will definitely send someone to kill you, and the news that Duke Yanlu, Yan Qingfeng, hired a killer to kill you will spread across Ji City in less than the time it takes to finish a meal. Zhuoguozheng of Great Yan Dynasty is plotting to seize the throne of a vassal state, and he has sent someone to assassinate Princess Yingchuan, who is the one who reported this case. This is more than enough to send him to eternal damnation." At last, Princess Yingchuan's body suddenly tensed up, and all her muscles began to tremble violently. Strange gurgling noises kept coming out from her throat. She leaned her body backward forcefully, and her eyes slowly rolled up. Her body was twitching like a frog that was skinned and electrocuted. It was a very bizarre sight. Princess Ing Chuan listened attentively to Lao Ai's instruction, while Wu Qi's eyes were flickering, as he memorized every single word Lao Ai said in his mind. Lao Ai shook his head, breathed out a long sigh and said, "I've always looked down on Qin Wuyang. Not only is he unable to achieve anything, the descendants he raises are getting worse and worse. Although Qin Qingshui's scheme is extremely vicious, but after all, he is still too young. How could the mastermind show himself so easily?" Lao Ai panted lightly, then slowly placed Princess Ing Chuan on the ground. He straightened his back and asked in an indifferent tone, "Ing Chuan, why didn't you stay in the Lu Kingdom? Why did you come to Ji City? I remember I told you that you will only come back to Ji City once every 10 years and offer me what you have harvested. Why did you come back so early this time?" Lao Ai stared at Princess Ing Chuan with surprise. Frowning, he casually pressed his hand to the side, and a jade bed appeared out of nowhere. Lao Ai lay down on the jade bed, then called over a few beautiful girls who stood under the eaves of the abode, asking them to climb onto the bed and have some fun with him. At the same time, he turned to Princess Ing Chuan and said, "Tell me everything in detail." Princess Ing Chuan dared not to be negligent. Without hesitation, she quickly told her that Lu Qingfeng was the illegitimate son of Yan Buji, who had now inherited the throne of Zhuguozheng and Duke Yan-Lu. She also told her that his mother's clan, Lady Ruyang, was from the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom. She also told her that the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom, where his mother's clan, Lady Ruyang, came from. She also told her that the Tai clan, Marquis Yuanyang of the Lu Kingdom, was now preparing for a rebellion to seize the foundation of the Lu Kingdom. Then, she told him the reason why she went to her old lover, Qin Qingshui, and asked for advice after arriving at Ji City. Stealthily, he opened his eyelids and peeked at Lao Ai and Princess Ing Chuan from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, Wu Qi swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had to admit that the current posture of both of them was very captivating. Lao Ai's sturdy body and Princess Ing Chuan's gentle and charming body were like the two extremes of yin and yang. Although they were emanating an extremely evil aura, they were giving off a boundless temptation. If not for the divine flame of order protecting Wu Qi's soul and stabilizing his mind in his spiritual ocean, and if he were any other cultivator, the fiend would have long grown inside his body, and the yin flame would have invaded his body, burning his Tao foundation into ashes. When Lao Ai entered Princess Ing Chuan's body, Wu Qi had his scalp go numb when he saw the ridiculously sturdy body of Princess Ing Chuan and the petite body of Princess Ing Chuan. Wu Qi had no idea how Princess Ing Chuan was able to endure such a frightening and huge creature, but judging from her moans, he could tell that she was experiencing a great thrill and a boundless pleasure. Lao Ai had only moved his body slightly, but Princess Ing Chuan immediately began to struggle and jump crazily like a fish that was scooped up from the shore. Apart from Princess Ing Chuan, there were nearly 100 enchanting beauties in the courtyard. The aura emanated from their bodies was exactly the same as Princess Ing Chuan's. If these beauties were the same as Princess Ing Chuan, the bees that Lao Ai released to pluck his energy, how amazing would Lao Ai's cultivation base be with this method? Hey, hey! Lao Ai exhaled a long and rough breath. A strange pinkish flame burst out from the vicinity of his dantian, within which a wisp of red sun could be vaguely seen. The flame was calcining and purifying the impure energies that came gushing out from Princess Ing Chuan's body bit by bit, eventually turning them into extremely pure energies and being absorbed by the wisp of red sun. The impure parts of the energies were quickly turned into white mist and sprayed out from Lao Ai's hair. Princess Ing Chuan's body trembled, and she cried out with a shrill voice, "Qin Qingshui is a son of a bitch. Why did he do this to Ing Chuan?" Chapter 119. Wu Qi shrunk his body, and the dense earth elemental energies in the surrounding began to gather towards him, gradually wrapping him up. Inch by inch, his body sank into the ground, and he was about to leave Prince Ren's mansion. Right at this moment, a knock was heard from the entrance of the courtyard where the abode was located. An old man with a ruddy complexion and a big beard, who had a dignified appearance and a majestic bearing, walked slowly into the courtyard. The old man was clad in a dark green long robe, embroidered with a few green swallows spreading their wings. Obviously, it was the imperial robe of a king of Great Yan dynasty. Upon seeing the naked Lao Ai and Princess Ing Chuan, the old man's expression remained unchanged. He bowed at Lao Ai without looking sideways and said, "Master, your disciple has something that I need to discuss with you." Wu Qi, who had more than half of his body sunk into the ground, had a solemn expression on his face. He nodded his head lightly, then quickly fled with the fastest speed possible. The Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen, was actually Lao Ai's disciple. If this news were to be spread out, perhaps Yan Dan would immediately come here with a sword in his hand. But, why did he give this news to Yan Dan for free? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and continued traveling at high speed underground. Along the way, he kept thinking about what Lao Ai had told Princess Ing Chuan. Suddenly, he let out a cold laugh. Sure enough, this Lao Ai was a man who wished to see the world plunged into chaos. Perhaps, he had been restraining himself for over 2,000 years, and now, he had the intention to stir up a storm. Come to think of it, it was about time for him to come out and stir up a storm. Yan Xianchen was his disciple. That also meant, a large number of ministers of Great Yan dynasty, and countless vassal kingdoms, had actually become Lao Ai's forces. For a peerless evil man like him to hide in Great Yan dynasty for over 2,000 years, it was definitely not for the good weather and happiness of Great Yan dynasty. Interesting, this is really interesting. I really want to see what kind of expression will Yan Dan have when he finds out that Lao Ai is hiding in Ji City. Wu Qi laughed in a strange voice, then shook his head and said, No, unless I gather the innate qi of the 5 elements and form the 5 elements Jin Dan, only then will I be qualified to fish in this muddy water. What I have now is far from enough, far from enough. Before figuring out the ins and outs of the Great Sun sect, before figuring out the origins of this world, rashly intervening in the affairs of this place, even if they could gain a little advantage at the beginning, if they were not careful, their souls would scatter and scatter. No matter how magical the scroll of stealing was, Wu Qi was just a little cultivator at the early stage of Jin Dan realm, and he had only inherited the water element Jin Dan. He had not even found any innate gold element spirit item yet. So, what made him take the initiative to provoke all these troubles? Low-key. No matter I am the inheritor of Scroll of Stealing, or the sect leader's disciple of Underhand sect, I travel 1,000 miles just for the sake of wealth. What does the fate of Great Yan dynasty have to do with me? Wu Qi kept reminding himself of his duty. He escaped from Prince Ren's mansion through the earth escape art, found a secluded and deserted alley, and came up to the surface. Using his divine sense, Wu Qi carefully peered into the sky. The sky patrolling Eagle Guards of Scouting Office were wheeling in the sky not far away, and he didn't see any sky patrolling Eagle Guards in this area. Hastily, he changed into the official uniform of Kingdom Supervisor from Zhuoguizheng's mansion, strode towards the Duke of Zhuoguizheng's mansion, which was situated on the west side of the Imperial Palace. Although Zhuoguizheng's mansion could not meddle in the affairs of Great Yan dynasty, for the 37 vassal kingdoms in the west, it was a government office that stood above their heads. Therefore, in Ji City, when Wu Qi, who was clad in the official uniform of Kingdom Supervisor, walked on the street, he attracted a lot of attention. Along the way, Wu Qi came to Zhuoguizheng's mansion as if nothing had happened. After showing his identity medallion to the soldier on duty at the entrance, he went straight into the mansion. In just a short while, Wu Qi was followed by a few secret agents from Scouting Office. As the #1 confidant of Duke Yan Le, Wu Qi didn't follow Lu Qingfeng to Zhuoguizheng's mansion to work. Instead, he vanished into thin air for a period of time. For some people with an ulterior motive, this was enough to make a great article. Especially when none of the guards at the few city gates of the inner city found out how Wu Qi entered the city. The mystery behind this incident was even more worthy to be studied by those with an ulterior motive. Standing at the entrance of Zhuo Guizheng's mansion, Wu Qi turned his head and gave a few glances at those secret agents who had been following him for a while. He let out a few strange laughs. The faces of those secret agents fell instantly, and they spun and left hastily. Wu Qi didn't want to go too far. He just wanted to scare them away, and only then did he swagger into Zhuo Guizheng's mansion. Immediately, he heard a sonorous roar coming from the entrance. This gold mine was first discovered by the Gaoling Kingdom. The Tsang-Lang River is also the water system of the Gaoling Kingdom. What right does the Lishan Kingdom have to share the profits from it? The voice sounded like the clashing of metals, sharp and jarring to the ears. It shook the entire hall of Zhuo Guizheng's mansion, and made the dust kept falling from the roof beams. Zhuo Guizheng's mansion was the most traditional yamen of Great Yan Dynasty. There was a big door right in front of it, and behind the screen wall was a spacious square. On both sides of the square were 2 rows of offices, where all the officials under Wu Qi's command handled their official duties. At the far end of the square was a hall where the chief officials handled their official duties, and the sonorous voice just now was heard coming from this hall. Striding across the 300 feet wide and 1,000 feet long square, Wu Qi saw the officials under Zhuo Guizheng sneakily poking their heads out from the offices on both sides, peeking into the direction of the hall. Wu Qi snorted coldly, and his voice brought with it a bone-piercing coldness that pierced right into the ears of these officials. Only then did these officials discover Wu Qi's presence, and shrunk their heads back to their offices shyly, continuing with their own tasks. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi walked into the hall and saw Lu Qingfeng sitting behind a long table at the far end of the hall like a wooden statue. Both of his palms were locked into a lotus incantation gesture, placed before his dantian, and his eyes were drooping. He didn't pay any attention to the group of burly men who were fighting fiercely in the hall. Instead, he was exercising his cultivation and cultivating. Inside the hall, which measured about 300 feet in both width and length, Yan Bugui, Luo Kadi, Zhang Hu, and a few others were standing with their backs against the walls. Apart from Yan Bugui, who was keeping a vigilant watch on the 2 groups of men who were arguing fiercely in the hall, all the others had their minds drifting away. Perhaps Zhang Hu was thinking about the new lover he met in a brothel in Ji City, as his saliva nearly dripped down from his mouth. Just like Lu Qingfeng, Luo Kadi, and Ma Liang, 2 warriors of Xiantian realm, had their eyelids drooping and were quietly regulating their breaths. Inside the hall, a tall and burly man, clad in a pale yellow battle robe and a chain-link soft armor, was shouting loudly. Judging from his voice, he was the emissary from the Gaoling Kingdom. Standing next to him was a young man, clad in a dark green battle robe, and underneath it was a half-body armor of Qilin devouring heart. His right shoulder was bared, and his left arm guard was actually a lower-grade magical item. He was emanating a faintly discernible ripple of energy. He was pulling and pulling the emissary from the Gaoling Kingdom, arguing with him with a loud voice. Next to both of them were several dozens of attendants from the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom. They were greeting each other's mothers, and he was greeting each other's ancestors. They were pulling and tangling each other like prostitutes soliciting customers on the street. If not because they were in the hall of Great Yan Dynasty's Zhuo Guizheng mansion, perhaps these attendants, who had the cultivation base of at least 40 to 50 years, would have long fought each other. Stealthily, Wu Qi walked into the hall, sticking close to the wall on the right and bypassing the group of nearly crazy emissaries. Stealthily, he came next to Lu Qingfeng, lowered his voice and asked, "Isn't it just a gold mine? Why are they making such a ruckus?" The overall strength of the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lishan Kingdom is stronger than the Lu Kingdom. 1 gold mine less or 1 gold mine more won't decide the fate of the 2 kingdoms. Why are they doing this? Lu Qingfeng opened his eyes. Soundlessly, 2 6-feet-long streams of white mist sprayed out from his nostrils. When he saw Wu Qi, a smile bloomed on his face, then he lightly knocked on a scroll placed on the table with his finger and said, "It is fine if it is just a gold mine. This is the information sent by the West Wind Guards of Scouting Office just now." The gold mine that has the reserves of approximately 80 million gold coins is just an associated mineral vein. Underneath the gold mine is a purple gold mine that stretches for 30 miles. Both kingdoms have excavated purple gold marrow of excellent quality from this mine. Beneath the purple gold mine is an extremely high-quality metal-attributed spirit stone mine. Right now, the spies of the two countries and the West Wind Guards stationed in the two countries have yet to survey the range and quality of the metal-attributed spirit stone mine. With a flick of his sleeve, Lu Qingfeng shook out a white and dazzling energy stone, about the size of a soybean. He said indifferently, "This is an energy stone sample found by the secret agents of West Wind Guards after they robbed and killed a mine master from the Gao Ling Kingdom. It is an upper-tier gold element energy stone of excellent quality, and it has a pure and single element. In the entire Great Yen dynasty, there are only 7 gold element energy stone mines of such quality." Grabbing the tiny gold element energy stone, Wu Qi sensed the extremely pure and sharp gold element energy contained within it, then he nodded his head. Among all the energy stone mines, the most common ones with the lowest value were the earth element energy stones, or those mixed with earth element energy stones of other elements. The energy stone mines were hidden deep under the ground. As the earth was of earth element, therefore, the earth element energy stones were the most common ones, and they were also mixed with fire and water element energy stones. In the vicinity of volcanoes or lakes, one could often find fire and water element energy stones. Therefore, apart from the earth element energy stones, the value of these two types of energy stones was slightly higher, and they were also relatively common. The rarest of them were the pure wood and gold element energy stones. Metal element energy stones were only found in huge metal mines, and it was extremely difficult to mine them, and it was extremely difficult to form them. As for wood element energy stones, unless they were found in a spirit land that was formed by the natural wood element energy, it was impossible for them to form naturally. Generally speaking, the value of metal element energy stones was ranked second among all the energy stones. Especially the pure gold element energy stones, which did not contain any impurities. Not only could it help in cultivation, it was also an indispensable supporting material for crafting all kinds of divine weapons. In addition to that, all kinds of powerful killing formations required pure gold element energy stones as the energy core, or else they would never be able to unleash the incomparably sharp killing force of gold element energy. Princess Ying Chuan is going to come and request an audience with young master. Young master, you just need to agree to her condition, allowing Tai clan to separate from the Lu kingdom and form their own kingdom. But young master, you need Princess Ying Chuan to promise you that the army of the Lu kingdom will cooperate with the army of Tai clan to attack the Gao Ling kingdom, and also cooperate with the Li Shan kingdom to attack the Gao Ling kingdom. Wu Qi sneered and said, "The Gao Ling kingdom is the mortal enemy of the Lu kingdom. They will never reject young master's condition." Lu Qingfeng asked in a low voice, "Join hands with the Li Shan kingdom?" "Fine, what about that mineral vein?" Wu Qi said in a low voice, "I'll go talk to the emissary of the Li Shan kingdom. The army of the Lu kingdom will cooperate with the Li Shan kingdom to attack the Gao Ling kingdom, and after seizing that mineral vein, Tai clan will monopolize 70% of the production, which will be the foundation of their new kingdom. If they don't agree, we'll join hands with the Gao Ling kingdom immediately. In short, we'll take over 70% of the mineral vein. Also, all the energy stones mined by the Li Shan kingdom will be purchased by us at the market price." After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi continued, "When discussing with Princess Ying Chuan, young master, try to take as much advantage of her as you can. Little Meng city of the Three Mountains province must be in our hands. We don't care how much land the Lu kingdom gives to Tai clan, but Little Meng city of the Three Mountains province will be our private property." Without any hesitation, Lu Qingfeng agreed to Wu Qi's suggestion. Chapter 120. Before Princess Ying Chuan arrived, Wu Qi had a quick discussion with Lu Qingfeng. After that, Lu Qingfeng grabbed a paperweight made from 1,000 years old ebony wood and forcefully slapped it on the table. At this moment, Lu Qingfeng exercised his cultivation and injected a great amount of innate energy into the paperweight. It produced a loud boom that sounded like the roar of thunder, and shook the entire hall. The emissaries of Gao Ling Kingdom and Lishan Kingdom were struck dumb. Chi tidied up his armor, kneeled down and bowed respectfully to Lu Qingfeng and said, "Your Excellency Guizheng, forgive us for our rudeness." Lu Qingfeng snorted coldly, gave both of them a fierce glare, and cried out in a low voice, "What is this place? Is this a place where you can make a ruckus? Somebody, please bring both of them to the side hall and calm down. Come back after you've figured out the solution to this matter. You must remember that this is Ji City, the capital of Great Yan Dynasty. This is a place where there are rules and laws. You are not allowed to mess around and humiliate Great Yan Dynasty." Luo Kadi and all the guards swarmed forward and separated the emissaries and attendants of both kingdoms, half forcing them to the side hall on the left and right side of the hall. After that, they closed the door. A large group of guards surrounded the two side halls, guarding them so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. Lu Qingfeng gave Wu Qi a look, then rose and walked towards the side hall where the emissaries of Lishan Kingdom were staying. Before Princess Yingchuan could come here and bring out the conditions that Wu Qi already knew, Lu Qingfeng had to convince the emissaries of Lishan Kingdom first. Meanwhile, Wu Qi called out to Zhao Qinzue, Meng Xiaobai, and a few other men, then left Zuo Guizheng mansion hastily. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Wu Qi was delighted to see Princess Zhang Li's exceedingly luxurious carriage speeding towards him. 8 ghost immortals, whose bodies were shrouded in a towering yin energy, were following close to the carriage with ferocious looks in their eyes. A dozen palace guards were riding on their mounts, trailing far behind, not daring to come too close. Seeing Wu Qi coming out from Zuo Guizheng's mansion, Princess Zhang happily lifted the curtain, revealing half of her smiling face. "How did you know that Zidan was coming, and specially went out to welcome me?" "That's not right, where are you going with them?" Quickly walking down the steps, Wu Qi approached Princess Zhang Li's carriage and said with a smile, "I'm going to do something fun. I was just fretting that I don't have anyone to use. Zidan, why don't I borrow these 8 seniors by your side?" Princess Zhang narrowed her eyes. With lightning speed, she stretched her hand out from the carriage window and grabbed onto Wu Qi's ear. Lowering her voice, she asked, "What do you want me to borrow them for? If there's anything fun to do, you must bring me along. If you want to hide from me and sneak away to have fun, I guarantee that no matter what you want to do, you won't be able to do it." Although Wu Qi's ear was grabbed, his smile became even more joyful. "All right, I've been waiting for you, Princess Zhang, to say this." If you didn't take the initiative to bring it up, Wu Qi was prepared to go to the imperial palace to look for her, and invite her to oversee it. With Princess Zhang following him, no matter what outrageous things Wu Qi did, the others would think that it was logical, right? Using the disguise of this unruly princess to do something, it was indeed an evil pleasure. Without explaining to Princess Zhang what he was going to do, Wu Qi summoned those palace guards and asked them to find a coach used by ordinary wealthy merchants for Princess Zhang. After that, he asked the 8 ghost immortals to restrain their strong ghost aura, tie their loose hair into a bun, and put on some jewelry and accessories, trying their best to look like an obedient housewife. After giving the ghost immortals and the coach a glance, Wu Qi turned to look at the luxurious yet bold long dress worn by Princess Zhang, which had a totally different style from the conservative and traditional palace dress of Great Yan Dynasty. Although this long dress had a strange style, all kinds of tiny symbols on it showed Princess Zhang Li's noble status. Therefore, he didn't want to alert her when he was going to do something later. Noticing the dilemma on Wu Qi's face, Princess Zhang said cheerfully, "Don't worry about me, just lead the way. Bai Zhuer always has a lot of clothes on her, so I'll just change into another one later. By the way, what are you going to do? Why do you want them to dress like this?" Frowning, Princess Zhang looked at the 8 ghost immortals, who had changed their appearances into ordinary housewives. She was puzzled. Wu Qi didn't explain, just pressed his hand on Princess Zhang Li's head and shoved her into the coach. Wu Qi, who had also changed into a new outfit, sat on the coachman's seat, waved the long whip and gave a loud shout, then drove the coach towards the city gate. Princess Zhang Li grumbled discontentedly in the coach. Then, she heard the rustling of clothes, and began to change her clothes in the coach. At the same time, Wu Qi also sensed that the strange ripple in the coach, which had disturbed the surrounding energies of 5 elements, was gradually disappearing. Wu Qi nodded his head. Princess Zhanglu was indeed a clever girl, as she had retracted the 5-colored divine rays behind her back in advance. With the cultivation base of Princess Zhanglu and the 8 ghost immortals, if they exercised their cultivation with all their might, they could probably suppress the Jin Dan's strange sign on the surface of their bodies for about 6 hours. After that, they would no longer have the energy to suppress the ripple in their bodies. 6 hours was more than enough. They drove the coaches, bringing with them a large group of palace guards, secret agents of scouting office, and guards from Duke Yan Li's mansion, who had their faces completely changed. They left the inner city and middle city in a mighty manner. Approximately 2 hours later, they arrived at the east side of the outer city, on the street that was very famous in Ji City, the mighty martial street. Great Yan dynasty's martial arts was very popular. Even in a remote corner like Little Meng City of the Lu Kingdom, there were still over 100 to 200,000 warriors begging for food there. In the territory of Great Yan dynasty, there were countless wandering swordsmen who roamed freely in the martial world. As the heart of Great Yan dynasty, Ji City was naturally a blessed land with the highest concentration of elite warriors. Those who believed that they could make a name for themselves in Ji City, could take root in Ji City, or even achieve a meteoric rise in their career, would gather here from all over Great Yan dynasty. And the mighty martial street was the place with the highest concentration of warriors in Ji City. This mighty martial street, which was 50 feet wide and 25 miles long, together with the 24 side streets and alleys on both sides, was home to all kinds of warrior clubs, martial clubs, dojos, swordsmen, archers, and many other warrior guilds. There were at least tens of thousands of them. Among them, the largest warrior clubs and dojos had over 10,000 warriors under their command, and many of them were peak-stage warriors of Xiantian realm. The background of these martial clubs and guilds was very complicated. Perhaps, one of the martial clubs was funded and established by one of the important ministers of Great Yan dynasty. To put it bluntly, these martial clubs and guilds were the private armies and guards kept by those top-notch nobles or super-wealthy people of Great Yan dynasty. Furthermore, they didn't need to occupy the legal quota of private armies, and they could always ask these warriors to do whatever they wanted to do, even if they were involved in some shady business. Even Scouting Office, a secret spy organization of Great Yan dynasty, would occasionally recruit some young warriors from the martial clubs in mighty Martial Street, and after training them, they would be recruited as the lower-level subordinates of Scouting Office. Sometimes, when there was a high-risk operation, the Scouting Office or the Criminal and Justice Office would directly recruit warriors here for their own use. Therefore, the mighty Martial Street was definitely the place with the most complicated population in Ji City. Hundreds of thousands of warriors would gather in this place. Fights, assassinations in the middle of the night, murders on the street, and many other things happened all day long. This was the only place in Ji City where the law of the land didn't really work, and everything was decided purely by the law of the jungle. Those in power of Great Yan dynasty had purposely loosened the management of the mighty Martial Street and the few blocks around it. As long as these warriors didn't hurt the common people, no matter if they killed, burned, or did anything else in this area, no one would look into it. Warriors were fierce tigers and wild wolves. In order to maintain the bloodthirsty and wild nature of warriors, they had to follow the law of the jungle, and only then could they pick out the most outstanding talents. Therefore, the mighty Martial Street had always been a place where no one dared to approach. Those who dared to enter the street were either rich men who had a lot of money in their pockets and were ready to hire someone to do something for them, or they were the nobles who held great power in their hands and could help some lucky warriors achieve a meteoric rise overnight, or they were the heroes of the pugilistic world who thought they had great martial arts skills and could create a world for themselves in this place. When Wu Qi was driving the coach and bringing a large group of guards to the mighty Martial Street, right in front of the coach, two groups of warriors were fighting each other with blades in their hands. No one knew why they were fighting, but a few young and beautiful girls were screaming hoarsely at the side of the fighting ring. It could be assumed that these girls were the cause of the fight. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, 3 warriors had fallen to the ground, bathed in blood. Very quickly, they were dragged into an alley by a group of men clad in black clothes using iron hooks. Covered with blood stains, the victorious warriors were greeting those tall and burly warriors around them complacently. Laughing out loud, they hugged a few beautiful girls and walked into an inn on the side of the street. Wu Qi looked at these men and shook his head disapprovingly. Meanwhile, Princess Xianglu stuck her head out curiously. Looking at the blood stains and a few missing blood stains on the ground, she said with a smile on her face, "Is there such a wonderful place in Ji City? Bai Zhuer, go back and give those few damn slaves a good beating. Why didn't they inform me about such a wonderful place? Did someone really get killed here just now? How many were killed? This blood is so red that it looks beautiful." Princess Xianglu had changed into a conservative black long dress, yet she still looked very beautiful. A few burly men who were passing by the street saw Princess Xianglu poking her head out from the window. They couldn't help but let out a sharp whistle and said, "Beauty, what are you doing in the mighty Martial Street? Are you looking for someone to kill, or are you looking for your gigolo? Although we brothers look ugly, we have strong muscles and bones, and we are the best partners on the bed." Princess Zhang Li's face turned green, and the faint ripple of energy once again emanated from her face. Without changing his expression, Wu Qi twisted his wrist and lashed out the horsewhip with a shrill whistle. The few burly men were badly beaten and bleeding, and were sent flying several hundred feet away while howling miserably. Upon witnessing the mighty power of Wu Qi's horsewhip, all the idlers lowered their heads and remained silent. The few burly men who were being beaten were experts of Peak Ho Tian realm. The man who could defeat them with such ease must be a Daoist of Xiantian realm. A Daoist of Xiantian realm was merely a coachman for someone else. Needless to say, who would dare to talk nonsense to Princess Xianglu? Wasn't that the same as courting death? The coach passed through the crowd, traveled along the mighty Martial Street for tens of miles, and finally stopped in front of a large-scale martial club. The front of this martial club was spacious and bright. It had 6 doors, and the 30 feet tall green lacquer door was very eye-catching. A horizontal board, 6 feet tall and 30 feet wide, was hung above the door. 4 large golden characters were engraved on it with pure gold, "Subdue people with martial arts." Under the glittering and glinting board, a row of 18 burly men with their heads held high and chest puffed out were standing there in an awe-inspiring manner. Hiss! Wu Qi sneered, then crooked his finger at a few palace guards who had changed their clothes behind the coach and said, "Kick down the door, break both the arms and legs of the watchdogs and throw them inside. Tell their club master, Shi Tianma, that our young miss has taken a fancy to their martial club, and we are here to challenge them." The few palace guards were struck dumb, while Princess Xianglu was so happy that her eyebrows were raised. With a kick, the coach was smashed to pieces. Princess Xianglu jumped down from the coach herself, leaped up the stairs, and kicked the door away. "Who is Shi Tianma? Get your young miss out here. We are here to challenge them." Chapter 121. Challenge the Martial Club. The group of burly men standing at the entrance of the Martial Club were struck dumb. Every year, a few new martial clubs would be opened in mighty Martial Street, and there would be more martial clubs being pushed aside by their peers, or being destroyed by some powerful martial artists. But, how could such a thing happen to them? Shi Tianma, the martial club master of Shi Martial Club, had come to Ji City 90 years ago to open up a martial club and teach disciples. After 30 years of hard work, Shi Martial Club now had over 30,000 disciples. Among them, there were over 70 Xiantian warriors, and nearly 1,000 peak stage Hotian warriors. There was also a rumor that, although Shi Tianma did not have the innate talent of cultivating spirit root, he had entered the Tao of martial arts, and had cultivated to the peak stage of embryonic breath realm of Xiantian realm. As long as he could tear apart the barrier of martial arts with his martial strength, he would be able to transform his chi and body with great perseverance and strength, stepping into the realm of human immortal from an ordinary warrior in Jin Dan. For the past 90 years, Shi Tianma had become a legend in the underworld of Ji City, an absolute grandmaster. Apart from the 30,000 apprentices who were still practicing martial arts in the martial club, countless apprentices had graduated from Shi Martial Club over the years. Some of these apprentices were the hangers-ons of influential clans, some were the generals in the army, and some were even the leaders of the sects in Ji City. In such a huge city like Ji City, as long as it was a business that could earn money, apart from those that were exclusively managed by the imperial family, Shi Martial Club could be found in all the other businesses. To be more specific, the power of Shi Martial Club alone was stronger than the combined strength of dozens of top-notch clans of the Lu Kingdom. No matter it was the absolute force or the influence in Great Yan Dynasty, even if all the forces of the Lu Kingdom were to be used, they would still be no match for Shi Tianma. Therefore, on the board hanging in front of Shi Martial Club, there was no sign of Shi Martial Club. Instead, there were 4 extremely arrogant characters, subduing others with martial arts. If explained in a positive way, it meant that Shi Tianma had a profound attainment in the Tao of martial arts, and was highly respected in martial arts. Therefore, he was able to subdue others with martial arts. If someone was not convinced, Shi Martial Club would use their fists to beat them until they were convinced. This was the so-called subduing others with martial arts. With such an overall strength and power, who would dare to challenge Shi Martial Club in front of their door? Princess Zhang kicked the door of the martial arts school into the courtyard. The strong men in front of the door were still in a daze. They stared at Princess Zhang blankly. Their limbs were stiff as if they were sleepwalking, and their eyes were fixed on her. They couldn't figure out what was going on for a long time. They didn't react, but Princess Zhang moved faster than anyone else. She laughed and rushed to the front of the 2 men, took out a handkerchief to pad her palm, and then gave each of them a heavy slap. A loud and clear popping noise startled Wu Qi, who was standing right next to him, and made him shrink his neck. 2 burly men nimbly leaped up into the air, with wisps of blood spurting out from the corners of their mouths, and large front teeth spilling out from their mouths. Drawing a parabola in the air, they thudded heavily into the huge courtyard behind the main entrance of Shi Martial Club, which measured nearly 2 miles in both width and length. When the 2 doors of the martial arts school flew into the courtyard, the 1-foot-thick door made from golden-grained sandalwood smashed onto the ground and produced a thunderous boom. As Princess Zhang had exerted too much force, the 2 doors slid straight into the courtyard along the ground paved with flagstones. A group of tens of young men, who were practicing their martial arts in the courtyard, let out a miserable howl, as their ankles and tibia were broken by the door. They fell to the ground holding their calves and howling miserably. The incident happened too abruptly. On the spacious square, over 3,000 young men, who were lifting stone weights, playing with barbells, hitting wooden stakes, and practicing their martial arts, all stared blankly at the entrance. Although it was a spacious square, and there were several thousand people, none of them uttered a single word. It was not until 2 burly men who were guarding the entrance were sent flying into the courtyard by Princess Zhang that the several dozens of young men who stood closest to the entrance roared out furiously, "Which blind fool dares to come to our Shi Martial Club and court death?" Before their words could fade away, miserable howls came from the entrance, one after another. Princess Zhang Li's personal serving ladies, Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer, rushed down from the coach with a beaming smile on their faces. Imitating their mistress, they kicked all the burly men who were guarding the entrance into the courtyard one after another. Although these two little serving ladies did not have any combat experience, they were after all, female officials who enjoyed a very high status in the imperial palace. They had taken a lot of spirit pills, and their cultivation base was at the peak of the Hotian realm. How could these burly men who were guarding the entrance withstand their kicks and kicks? Relying on the power of Princess Xianglu, these two girls were used to being lawless and out of control. Therefore, they did not know how to control their strength. Princess Xianglu only managed to knock out the teeth of two burly men, but their kicks nearly broke all the internal organs of these burly men. Mouthfuls of bright red blood kept spraying out from their mouths, and very soon, a small puddle of blood was formed on the square. A series of clanging noises rang out, as nearly 100 apprentices of the martial club pulled out all kinds of blades, spears, swords, and halberds from their weapon racks, cursing furiously as they charged toward the entrance. Some reckless young men even roared out, "Let's see where these few girls came from. Chop the men behind them and feed them to the dogs, then we can use these few girls to warm our beds. Brothers, let's go. Whoever succeeds will be the first one to have his way with these three girls." These apprentices, who were sweating profusely in the square of Shire Martial Club and practicing some low-grade outer martial arts, were born in the marketplace, and had been infected with countless bad habits. Relying on the fact that they had the advantage in numbers, these young men kept spewing obscenities like a rainstorm towards Princess Xianglu, Baijuer, and Baizuer. Upon hearing their words, Princess Xianglu, who was beaming with joy a moment ago as if she was just playing a game, had her face turned livid with anger. Abruptly, there was a faint five-colored gleam flashing in her eyes. Waving her hand casually, Princess Xianglu cried out in a stern voice, "Break all the limbs of these people, then throw them into the myriad red river to feed the fishes. Beat them, break their dog heads and rob this martial club. Let's rob this dojo. Today, this dojo is the only one I'm interested in." Ignoring that she was wearing a cumbersome long dress, Princess Xianglu raised her jade-like legs and kicked away a dozen apprentices who came near her. Then, she turned her head and said to Wu Qi with a sweet smile, "Since you've taken a fancy to this martial club, are you going to rob it and open your own martial club? Just consider it as a gift from me. Later on, ask the officials of Ji City Mansion to get you the title deed of this place." In a fit of rage, Princess Xianglu did not control her strength. Every single apprentice who was kicked away by her had their bones broken and tendons torn, with blood gushing out from their 7 apertures. Before those apprentices, who had charged forward with the courage and vigor, could see the actions of Princess Xianglu clearly, they had been knocked away by their fellow apprentices. Nearly 100 of them were lying on the ground, struggling and wailing. It was a very embarrassing situation. Meanwhile, a large number of men brought by Wu Qi had rushed forward. They picked up specially made sticks made of white wax, each half the length of an adult's arm, and began smashing and beating these apprentices on the ground. Their limbs and joints were broken, and many of their ribs were broken. It was especially true for those few experts from the palace guards. These apprentices had insulted Princess Xianglu right in front of their faces, and it had scared them out of their wits. At this moment, with the order given by Princess Xianglu, they struck a deadly blow on these apprentices, aiming their long sticks at the vital spots of those young and strong men. In just a blink of an eye, several dozens of apprentices had been killed, and nearly 100 were severely wounded. They were dragged out of the entrance of the martial club by Meng Xiaobai and his men, and thrown onto the street. For a moment, the mighty martial street was filled with crowds of people. Countless wandering knights and warriors were rushing towards Shire Martial Club, impatiently waiting to see who was so bold as to challenge Shire Martial Club. Upon witnessing the ferocious and imposing manner displayed by Wu Qi and his men, numerous apprentices on the square gathered together, looking at them with both anger and fear in their eyes. When an expert made his move, he would be able to know the actual situation of his opponent. As there were so many warriors of Xiantian realm and peak stage Hotian realm in Shire Martial Club, these apprentices had a very broad vision. Naturally, they could tell that these several hundred guards brought by Wu Qi were all top-notch warriors of the Hotian realm, and were not people they could afford to provoke. A loud, muffled shout that sounded like a thunderclap rang out, as a burly man, who only had a piece of cloth wrapped around his crotch area, revealing his snow-white muscles, and had 9 exquisite tattoos of fierce tigers embroidered on his body, each with different expressions, dashed out from the crowd of apprentices. The 9-feet-tall burly man stared at Princess Zhanglu and shouted, "May I ask what is the purpose of visiting Sher Martial Club, miss?" Princess Zhanglu tilted her little chin up proudly, her eyes rolling up to the top of her head. She snorted coldly and said, "Are you deaf? I'm here to challenge your martial club. The geomancy of your martial club is pretty good, and the land is big enough. I've taken a liking to it." Wu Qi had fully performed the image of a henchman. He fished out a gold ingot from his sleeve and threw it on the ground, smiled at the burly man and said, "Anything our miss has taken a liking to, we've never failed to get it. Either you ask Shi Tianma to come out here and discuss with us, or you can buy the land of your Sher Martial Club with 3 taels of gold." 3 taels of gold, you've made a big fortune. The tiger-striped man was so angry that his face turned blue. The piece of land occupied by Sher Martial Club on mighty Martial Street was very large, and it was Shi Tianma who had spent 3 years of painstaking effort in challenging all the martial clubs, convincing all the leaders of those martial clubs to sell their land to Shi Tianma at a very low price. 90 years had passed, and along with the reputation of Sher Martial Club, the value of this mansion could no longer be measured with money. Yet, he wanted to buy such a large piece of land and so many houses and buildings on it with just 3 taels of gold. This was daylight robbery. The burly man sneered. He gave Princess Zhanglu a look, shook his head, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and snapped, "If you want to seize the foundation of Sher Martial Club, you'll need to have the ability to do so. If you want to meet our old master, you'll have to defeat us, the instructors of the front yard." With a loud roar, the muscles on the burly man's body bulged. With a forceful stomp, he shattered 2 stone bricks on the ground. His eyes went wide as he let out a tiger roar, thrusting his fist towards Wu Qi's chest. This burly man had a much better moral standing than those apprentices of the martial club. When he saw that Princess Zhanglu was a girl, he was too lazy to fight with her. Instead, he chose Wu Qi as his opponent. Before Wu Qi could make his move, Meng Xiaobai, who had just dragged a few apprentices of the martial club and thrown them out of the entrance, had already rushed towards Wu Qi with a loud shout. "Defeat Xiaobai first, then you can fight my elder brother." A stream of white gas sprayed out from Meng Xiaobai's mouth, and he let out a long roar that sounded like a bull. The muscles on his body bulged up at a high speed. With a shake of his body, a deep, muffled, thunderous boom rang out as he raised both of his fists and thrust towards the burly man. A loud boom rang out, as Meng Xiaobai and the burly man had exchanged a solid punch. Meng Xiaobai was knocked 7 to 8 steps back while coughing blood, while the burly man's chest was left with an inch-deep mark of a fist. He stared blankly at Meng Xiaobai, as his body slowly went limp. After that, blood began to ooze out from all 7 apertures of his body. Both men exchanged a punch. Meng Xiaobai was severely wounded, while the burly man's heart meridian was crushed and killed on the spot. A hideous smile appeared on Wu Qi's face. He grabbed Meng Xiaobai with one hand and slowly injected a thread of innate water energy into his body, helping him dredge his meridians and digest the clotted blood. While doing that, he cried out with a stern voice, "Who else? If no one dares to come forward, then ask Shi Tianma to come out and talk to me." With an unsightly expression, all the apprentices of the martial club took a few steps back, but none of them said a word. Wu Qi gave Yi Yan and these apprentices a glance. Suddenly, behind this group of apprentices, he saw a man that he had never expected to see. That day when Wei Xiaoxiao paid a visit to Lu Qingfeng, this man was one of the guards who stood beside Wei Xiaoxiao's coach. Together with a few attendants, he was standing behind the crowd, staring at Wu Qi with great astonishment. Right when Wu Qi saw him, this man immediately spun and left. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.